Call to order the regular meeting of the governing board. If I can find my agenda. Let the record show all members are present. Let's rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under Okay. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda?
I move we adopt the agenda with the addition of board reports, superintendent's reports, and Mr. Miclerino, do you have a report?
I do not this evening. Thank you for asking.
Then we won't include you then, since you don't need to be.
Can I get a second?
Second.
I have a question.
Yes.
I don't know that, are we able to add stuff to the agenda? I thought all agenda items had to be posted 24 hours ahead of schedule in order to be.
It was my understanding that we did have the leeway because it's not an item we're voting on. If it was something we were going to vote on, something that was,
Okay.
if it was going to result in a vote, that it would.
Okay.
Now, if that's incorrect information, we can verify it, but it was my understanding that we could. It was at the discretion to add. I know Peoria does add to theirs, so it's actually on theirs agendized that they can.
They can add those things.
They can add or move, yeah.
Okay.
So long as they're not
Got it.
voting on it.
Understood.
But
Okay,
for
I just-
future though, we will research it and just ensure that we are correct. Aye.
Good question, though.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. So let's go ahead and start with the board reports. Ms. Ordway.
I know this will shock you, short and sweet. We are on our way to the winter break, so everyone keep away from the illness I have, and we'll all be good. Thank you.
Ms. O'Brien.
No report. Thank you.
Ms. Tweedy.
I just want to say congratulations to Miss Frank. She was a finalist for Employee of the Year. And that was it.
Oh. Ms. Frank.
My 15 seconds of fame are now up. Thank you, Ms. Tweedy. Welcome back, Ms. Ordway. I really enjoyed the Superintendent Student Advisory Council meeting before break and really enjoyed working with the kids and was very impressed. That's it for my report.
Okay. I'll get mine short and sweet as well. I want to welcome everybody back from Thanksgiving. I hope you had a lovely break. One thing that I do want to add to our request, and I didn't mean to do it at the last meeting, last month we had an article that came out in one of the papers. It's good to see that people are watching the videos and are engaging. It's a positive that they are. However, the article was not only misleading, it was extremely factually incorrect. And that led me to question that perhaps it's not as clear. One thing I did notice that Peoria has where when it comes time to vote, they hit a button and a vote comes up and it lists. I would like for us to explore having something similar so that the votes are recorded, who voted how. But until that time, I would request that we do a roll call vote. And that's it for my report. Dr. Finch.
I just want to thank Ms. Frank too. When we were trying to think of ideas for a person to come and talk to the students, and it was about science, and it was about projects that students could be working on together as a district and as a building. Ms. Frank's name popped right up right away, and she did an excellent job. Obviously, with a room of 50 plus or minus students. So they kept her hopping, I'm sure. I was there for most of it, had to leave, but she did a nice job, and we thank her for that service. And we're going to keep signing her up. So she didn't realize she's getting signed up for part 2 and part 3 and part 4. Maybe a lifetime membership. And also, I want to thank all the bands that did so well at the festival. At the end of the year, the state titles were just out of reach, but what I was looking for, and I think the band directors, and I talked to each one of them at the stadium, that each one of them said they did better than their last performance, and that's what you want. And I noticed that as well. Each performance was better than the last one. So that's learning at its finest when you perform at your peak at the greatest contest at the end, and that's what you want. And so congrats to the bands and the directors and all the parents. There was a small army that gets them ready, and so we want to thank all the parents and community members that help out with setting up the bands.
Okay. Let's go and move on to consent agenda.
I move that the governing board accept the consent agenda. Or
Second.
approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Sorry.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Roll call,
Oh.
please. Ms. Ordway,
Aye.
Ms. O'Brien,
Aye.
Ms. Tweedy,
Aye.
Ms. Frank.
Aye.
Aye as well. Okay, if we can move on to action item, employee travel.
I move that the governing board accept the administration's recommendation to approve employee out-of-state travel. And I guess we need a second.
Oh, I was going to second, but I thought you were going to say something else.
You need to clarify how we're going to do it.
And voting by trip. And there are 2 trips, A and trip B.
A second.
Okay, all those in favor of
Aye.
doing it that way? Ms. Ordway? Ms. O'Brien?
What are we voting on?
We're voting that, it's a little confusing voting it this way. She motioned that we
The-
vote per trip. So are we going to accept that motion?
What-
And then I guess
I
we
thought
would
we'd
have
already
to motion.
established that we do that. So should the motion be
So do you
to
want to
vote-
just motion instead
to
by just
vote
each
to
one?
approve trip A?
Yeah, do it that way, because otherwise it would be lumped.
Okay. I move that the governing board approve employee out-of-state travel request trip A.
Second.
Attending National Council for Teachers of Mathematics.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none. Ms. Ordway?
Aye.
Do you? I'm sorry.
I was just curious, how many math conferences have curriculum specialists attended so far this year?
President Fisher, Mrs. Frank, this is one of 2 for 2 of them. That would be Miss Edelson and Miss Villalobos, I believe.
Okay. Do you know of other trips that are planned for this year, or is it just the 2 trips that they've prioritized for this year?
This would be the prioritized trip. The other one was a middle school focused math conference, and then this is the national one.
Okay. Because I know we'd had some discussion about prioritizing trips, and so I
Yes.
just wanted to clarify that had been done.
Ms. Ordway did vote aye. You had already voted. Do you want
I
to
had
revote?
already voted, and
Okay.
I voted aye.
Okay. Ms. O'Brien?
Aye.
Ms. Tweedy?
Aye.
Ms. Frank?
Aye.
Ms. Fisher also votes aye. Can I get a motion for B?
I move that the governing board accept the administration's recommendation, employee travel trip B, which is focus on middle school math topics.
Second.
Is there any conversation on this one? Seeing none. Ms. Ordway?
Aye.
Ms. O'Brien?
Aye.
Ms. Tweedy?
Aye.
Ms. Frank?
Aye.
Ms. Fisher also votes aye. Okay, let's move on to the ASBA bylaw proposed changes.
I move that the governing board provide direction to delegate to vote on behalf of DVUSD governing board regarding proposed ASBA bylaw changes.
Second.
Okay, for this, I believe we also have to vote on per item. So, and we need to, Yeah, well, we need to keep notes for Ms. Tweedy. Did everybody read the items through already, or do we need them to be read? No, okay,
Read them all.
okay.
We discussed them all at the last
Yeah, we
meeting.
did, that's why I'm just asking. So I wouldn't say we need to read them, just go ahead and propose. Yes, we will write it down.
Okay, so for Proposal A, Article 5, Section 9, Officers and Board of Directors and Executive Committee, vacancies and removal from office.
Is there
Second.
any questions or concerns on this one? Seeing none. Ms. Ordway,
Aye.
Ms. O'Brien,
Aye.
Ms. Tweedy,
Aye.
Ms. Frank.
Aye.
I will vote aye for this as well.
Proposal B, Article 8, Amendment of Bylaws and Core Beliefs.
Second.
Okay.
Oh, are we just voting or are we discussing?
Well, if there's a discussion, this is when we would have it. Ms. O'Brien, you had a,
I do have a comment.
Ah.
Their B and C are on the same concept, and it's who must vote and how much of a vote you need to make a bylaw change to the ASBA bylaws.
you are correct. In theory, basically, if you voted for A, you would not want to vote for B and C if they're all together. Is that what you're saying?
Well, A is about vacancies and removal from office. B
Okay.
is about how many people,
The amended bylaws, okay.
how many are necessary for bylaw. And yes, I would just like to share some information just to make sure everybody's aware of it, that B says that 60% of the membership must vote and that 75% of those 60% must then vote yes, versus C is just that they need a 2/3 approval of those that are voting. So there is no minimum membership required in C. And I just know that in the 3 years, and I would imagine that Mrs. Ordway could offer even a longer history, that the 3 years we've been here, or 2 years, I guess, because the third one's coming up, they've never been able to get the minimum required so far. So just as information for how one may want to vote.
Right, we had discussed this one in the last one. Essentially what that means is if they are reliant on getting 2/3 of all districts, that means all districts would have to, if you only have 50% show up, you guarantee nothing will pass. Nothing will change. So that's what we had discussed in the meeting. So you want a motion to accept A or B? I mean B or C.
Well, I think we can vote on B and then vote on C separately. I just wanted to make sure that we're aware of what each one is before we vote. That's the only reason I provide the information.
They contradict each other though, so if we voted
We
on
can't
both-
vote yes on both, is
Well,
what I mean.
Right.
we could. It's
We
just
could,
not. It
but-
wouldn't make sense, which is why I
Right.
bought the information.
Right.
I think, but however.
Kind of like playing roulette and
Mhm.
bet on black and
It
red.
is, and taking your chances.
Then if we're going to vote on either a B or C as opposed to voting on them individual, then I would recommend we vote yes on or vote for C, which is the 2/3 approval of those that choose to vote. That's my opinion.
I would concur if we could get a motion that direction and see if the board accepts that.
Okay, so I think the motion that's currently on the table is to vote on Proposal B.
So we'd have to amend it.
So,
So you'd have to amend it. to-
So, I move to amend the motion to approve Proposal C
Over B.
over B.
I second that amendment.
Ms. Ordway,
Aye.
Ms. O'Brien,
Aye.
Ms. Tweedy,
Aye.
Ms. Frank.
Aye.
And Ms. Fisher also votes aye.
So now, don't
No.
we have to vote on it?
Yeah,
approve
we
the
do.
amendment.
Then we have to vote again on the new motion. Any other discussion? Seeing none. Ms. Ordway,
Aye.
Ms. O'Brien,
Aye.
Ms. Tweedy,
Aye.
Ms. Frank,
Aye.
Ms. Fisher also votes aye. So it passes for item C.
I move the governing board approve proposal D, which is a technical change in the language of the ASBA bylaws from Hispanic Native American Indian Caucus to Hispanic Native American Caucus.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Seeing none, Ms. Ordway.
Aye.
Ms. O'Brien.
Aye.
Ms. Tweedy.
Aye.
Ms. Frank.
Aye.
And I will vote aye as well.
I move the governing board approve proposal E, Article 5, Section 2, referring to the officers and board of directors and executive committee and the board of directors.
Second.
Any discussion regarding this change? It's just the addition of the past president. Seeing none, Ms. Ordway.
Aye.
Ms. O'Brien.
Aye.
Ms. Tweedy. Ms. Frank.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well.
I move the governing board approve proposal F, meetings and voting annual delegate assembly.
Second.
Article 6, Section 3. Sorry.
Yeah, discussion. This is actually an addition. But Ms. O'Brien, did you have a discussion regarding this one?
I would ask my fellow board members to vote no on this because this could cause the delegate assembly meetings to go on and on and on ad nauseum.
Like ours.
Because the current rule right now allows for a motion to end debate and then a vote. It does take I think a 2/3, I apologize, yes vote to end that debate. Otherwise, there would be no method for which to end debate, and it would go on.
The only concern I would have, and it happened this year at the delegate assembly, is you would have someone wanting to call the vote because they see somebody walking across, because all amendments have to be submitted in writing. And I question whether that would stifle. If you have somebody who is on the far side of the room from the secretary and someone on this side, someone they know they don't want their opinion to be aired, there's the potential of, if there were a controversial change or something they were going to vote on. Because this year that happened a couple times where they were going to call the vote and they stopped it and said it's too late. They already turned in their paper. So I'm wondering.
I don't think that if somebody wants to do an amendment, that they're going to, as I recall, at this delegate assembly, we didn't allow the call for the vote to end debate when there was somebody trying to submit paperwork to do an amendment. So
There was a couple of attempts to, though. Okay. So I'm wondering, would that cause this?
I think there may be a problem. I understand the intent behind it, but the way it's worded, no action, it does open up the possibility of debate going on and on and on with no possibility of reaching a conclusion. So I'm not sure that the way this is worded is the right way to go about solving the problem.
Right. And that was my concern. Because it is a problem. You don't want it to go on forever, but at the same time, you don't want to stifle.
Yeah, I would say vote no on this because of the wording, and then if they want to come back with at next year another time.
Well, that's up.
But
Yeah,
I don't know. I have a problem with the way this is worded.
Any other discussion?
I wonder, can you, as a board, give your delegate the amendment that you would like to see, it to be?
yes,
We
we
could
could next
have
year. We could
next year.
draft one for next year and submit
Do it
proper
at that time.
No,
No.
that was at the last,
Okay.
late now.
about a month ago or so was
Yeah.
when that could have occurred.
So it has to be a
Yep.
time.
Yep.
Right, there's a time to do it, and if we wanted to submit different language that changed
We
it,
could do so next year. Okay.
Well, I have attended them for a long time, and there's always been more of a problem of someone having the circular conversation forever, as opposed to someone calling a vote too early. It's always been very thoughtful and respectful. And I believe it would most likely have to do with who's facilitating and the leader of that meeting. But I have, bless you, I have sat at those delegate meetings for hours and hours listening to absolutely nothing because, I don't know, they want to wear you down or whatever it is. But at least this gives some hope. And I don't think that it would be, it's not within the membership to just say, I'm calling the vote and that's the end of it. That's not
Yeah,
that's not what we do.
I would have never thought so until this year.
But
And
it
I
didn't
saw-
happen.
I did see it happen or attempt to happen a couple times, and it
Right,
was,
and
it was
and
squashed.
attempting for it to happen is great, but it didn't happen. And I think that the ethics of the people that are there override this. And if you don't give it an opportunity to end it, then you run the risk of not having people take part in the delegation, in the voting.
I think too, if we're going to give a mechanism for it to go on forever, we should try it. We should vote yes when someone else is the delegate, so I won't have to go listen to it.
Well, and but I think it's an excellent idea to then discuss for next year different wording.
Yeah.
But I would not suggest that we give somebody the opportunity to speak on forever as I'm going on right
Right.
now. So I'll stop.
And I know we're not giving them the opportunity. This is new, so this has never been in place. This is already in existence. This would stop a historical, and it is a concern. However, I do agree that the wording's wrong. But if anybody else, any other questions? Seeing none, Ms. Ordway.
Can I vote last, please?
Sure. Ms. Frank,
Okay, so I vote no.
Ms. Tweedy,
No.
Ms. O'Brien.
No.
I will also vote no, Ms. Ordway.
No.
One fails. Or the text doesn't fail, we're just going to vote no to it.
I move the governing board approve proposal G, Article 7, committees and caucuses, Section 2, caucuses.
Second.
Okay, this one is the addition of the conservative caucus. I will not repeat my joke.
I couldn't hear it last week.
Okay, my joke was,
I don't want to hear it this
I like
week.
it, but shame on you. I like it, but no,
That
who
was
would
a joke.
attend besides me? It's just, you
It
know,
was a joke.
yeah. So is there any other discussion regarding this one? Seeing none, let's go ahead and call the vote. Ms. Ordway,
Yes.
Ms. O'Brien,
Yes.
Ms. Tweedy,
Yes.
Ms. Frank,
Yes.
and I definitely vote yes.
I move the governing board accept proposal H, Article 6, meetings and voting, Section 3, annual delegate assembly.
Second.
Okay, this is regarding a basic workshop.
Oh, the delegate assembly
Having
for
the delegate
dummies.
assembly
For
hold the
dummies.
workshop. Just to chime in my opinion, I think if it was mandatory, it would be concerning because then you would lose membership. But I think there are individuals who would appreciate it. I think it would be a good option. I, again, don't know that this is the way to do it, though. Ms. O'Brien suggested even a video type thing, and I think that might be good. But for new board members who are first-time delegates, I think it would be good. Any other discussion regarding this one, though? Seeing none, Ms. Ordway,
No.
Ms. O'Brien,
No.
Ms. Tweedy,
No.
Ms. Frank,
No.
and I will also vote no.
Okay.
We're at the end of that one. Okay. Need to approve a motion to approve the addenda contracts.
I move that the governing board accept the administration's recommendation to approve the addenda contracts in the attached listing.
Second.
Okay, any discussion regarding this item? Seeing none, Ms. Ordway,
Aye.
Ms. O'Brien,
Aye.
Ms. Tweedy,
Aye.
Ms. Frank,
Aye.
and I will vote no. Okay, we are down to public comments. I have two. I have Trent Taylor and Maria Leyva. If you could each come up to the podium here. Ms. Frank will read the admonishment, and then when she's done, if you could step up to the podium, state your name.
The board invites public comment on the district's business in general and on any agenda item in specific. All speakers must observe the rules of decorum. Speakers must fill out a card listing name, address, and topic and hand it to the board secretary prior to the president calling the meeting to order. Speakers must make their comments in no more than 3 minutes. If necessary to accommodate all speakers within the 30-minute overall limit, the board president may shorten each speaker's time. Constructive criticism is in order. Rudeness, vulgarity, disruptive conduct, or remarks disrespecting personal dignity are not in order and will not be allowed. Under the Arizona Open Meeting Law, the governing board cannot discuss or act on any items not listed on the agenda. Board members may respond to a criticism made by a speaker, ask staff to review a matter, or ask that a matter be put on a future agenda.
Okay, you could step to the podium, state your name.
I'm Maria Leyva. I am Deer Valley Education Association President. President Fisher, Governing Board, Superintendent Finch, and guests, I am speaking tonight on behalf of the certified employees whose salaries are directly tied to the Classroom Site Fund, in particular performance pay. Like many of my fellow educators in the summer of 2000, I remember standing on sidewalks, holding Prop 301 signs, knocking on doors, making phone calls to registered voters, and advocating in any way possible for the voters of Arizona to pass Prop 301. Some current DVUSD teachers were still in elementary school in 2000, and those teachers who began their careers in 2000 have never known a salary without Prop 301 compensation included. Prop 301 was intended and was written as a salary increase for teachers. 40% of Prop 301, now referred to as the Classroom Site Fund, was labeled as performance pay. It was never intended as a bonus for teachers. It was always intended and written to be part of a teacher's overall compensation. Currently, every Classroom Site Fund eligible teacher receives a total of $4,700, which includes $2,450 in performance pay, to be paid out in June. The Classroom Site Fund is set to sunset. Prop 301 sunsets in 2020-2021 school year. Before that, Arizona voters will need to approve its renewal in whatever form it appears on the ballot. I cannot imagine a day in where districts across Arizona will have to inform their teachers that they will have to take a $5,000 to $7,000 salary cut because the Classroom Site Fund no longer exists. Potentially, this means that any improvements to next year's performance pay plan could only be in effect for the next 2 years if the Classroom Site Fund is not renewed by voters. Now is not the time for drastic changes to the plan or lighting the proverbial hoops on fire that teachers have to jump through for a portion of their compensation. In closing, the Performance Pay Committee has performed its function to the best of its ability with the current plan proposal submission process. As the governing board, you can direct the committee, comprised of stakeholders like administrators, teachers, and parents, to do its work, which is to first reach consensus on the performance pay plan, submit the proposal to you, the board, for approval. That's the current process, and we hope that you would direct the committee to do that. Thank you.
Mr. Tyler, if you could step up, state your name for the record.
Good evening. My name is Trent Traylor. President Fisher, Vice President Frank, board members. First of all, thank you for this opportunity to address you. I'm here with my wife, April, and Anne-Marie Donfrio, as representing students, families, and faculty of the Gavilan Peak Mandarin Immersion Program in Anthem. We're concerned by rumors we've heard in our community that the Mandarin Immersion Program may be discontinued. While we hope it's only a rumor, we are compelled to show support for the program and speak to its benefits. The Mandarin Immersion Program is an example of forward-thinking educational programming that will help provide opportunity for our children to better compete and prosper as they continue their education and on towards their careers. It's this type of programming that sets the DVUSD apart. We have a daughter in the 3rd grade at Gavilan Peak Elementary. She's been involved in the Mandarin immersion program since kindergarten. It is her normal to be in a world where half of her school day is taught completely in Mandarin, and her classmates speak only in Mandarin. She's engaged and enthusiastic in the program, as are her classmates. Chloe speaks to family and friends with pride about her experiences in the Mandarin program. April and I recently had the pleasure of helping Chloe complete a video project. Watching your 8-year-old speak fluidly in Mandarin as she introduces members of her family, telling about their work and interests, and shares her likes, dislikes, and hobbies is extraordinary. The benefits of language immersion are many. Proficiency in a second language and intercultural competency skills open education and employment opportunities. There can be a positive relationship between bilingual proficiency and basic cognitive abilities. Mandarin is the language of the 2nd largest economy in the world, giving our students the possibility of an advantage in the growing global economy through the immersion program. Understanding and engaging other cultures is an invaluable opportunity for children and young adults. The Mandarin immersion program has already opened Chloe's and other 3rd grade minds to the Chinese culture. We have attended as a family cultural festivals that we've been introduced to through the Mandarin program and would not have otherwise been. Learning the differences and similarities to your own culture and traditions helps give perspective to a young mind. The 2015 bond election highlighted language immersion as a program that would be supported by the board. If discontinuation of the Gavilan Peak Mandarin immersion program is a possibility, please be open to a dialogue to
Your
help
time is up if you want to just wrap it up.
Thanks.
No,
To
you
help
can
us
go ahead.
understand your concerns and help you understand our passion for the program. We invite you to visit Gavilan Peak if you haven't already. We think you will be as proud of the program as we are. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you. Hey, that,
Make a request to, can you find out where these rumors are coming from and update the board if we're putting any rumors out? Because with all the speaking and emails I've received, I'd just like to know what information's being circulated because I don't have access to it. You?
okay. The future dates are posted on the website. Can I get a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 That one doesn't recall. That one does not be a roll call needed.
That would be 5
It's
roll
just
call ayes,
Okay.
not rolling ayes.
Okay, we're gonna, does anybody need a break before we go on to the next? Okay, we're gonna take a second while Ms. Frank gets her board docs back up, and then we'll move on to our special meeting.
Or does it? No. Okay. Oh, there it is. Okay. Good. Paper and yes.
Okay. We're going to go ahead and move on to the next meeting. I'd like to call to order the special meeting work session of the governing board. Let the record show all members are present. Can I get a motion to adopt the agenda?
I move we adopt the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor?
Roll call aye.
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 And I vote aye as well. Okay. So salary and benefits, are we going to Jim or?
Sure.
Okay. It's the Jim show. I just wanted to know if it's just a long drawn-out or.
President Fisher, members of the board, Dr. Finch, we have some information to share with you regarding one of the superintendent's goals that have been agreed upon, and it is an extension, if you will, to an efficiency study that we commissioned a couple years ago now. So I've provided for you at the DAS the actual report itself. It's dated back to December of 2015. It's an efficiency study that was done by the firm of Heinfield Meach and Company. And as a result of that efficiency study, we actually implemented portions of it as part of our district improvement plan. So we like to consider this the goals that the cabinet had for 2016-17, and we completed many of the functions that were identified in the efficiency report. Also in that district improvement plan included some other items that weren't part of the efficiency study, but were part of things that were identified from the Southwest Alliance of Excellence feedback reports, plural, that we have received. One of the things that was noted in the efficiency study itself, in terms of the next steps, if you want to just flip to the very last page of the report, you're welcome to read it all if you want at your leisure. I thought it was the last page. Oh, it is the back page of the last page. Under next steps, they, and even when the presentation was made by Ms. Karen Smith, the information provided was that a total compensation and/or salary review would also be recommended as a result of that. So I'm just kind of giving you the genesis of how we got to where we are, and we have identified several areas that we would like to receive or to gather additional information to be able to identify where we stand relative to, I'll call it the marketplace, as it's related to our salaries and benefits. So that's how we got to where we are. What we also have provided for you in hard copy is a draft copy of the scope that Ms. Karen Smith has authored for us with some input from us up to this point in time. And this would be to commission their firm, again, Heinfield Meach and Company, to be able to perform this study for us and specifically identify these areas with additional input from the board. And it's the reason for the work study session this evening, is to find out if additional items need to be included or if this scope meets the expectation. Again, since this has been a goal that was established by the board for Dr. Finch this year. And the information that's provided in the scope is based on information that we have talked about previously. For example, our Information Services and Technology Department, or IS&T as we like to refer to them. There's been some question about some of the programs that we have in place for the particular employees of the district. We want to look at how we compare to our other districts. So that's the very first section that you see here. We've looked at detailed information, or as detailed as we can get, within various functions of the Uniform System of Financial Record Keeping, the USFR. But the detail of those records is not something that's publicly available. It has to be provided on a volunteer basis by the actual individual districts to get to a higher level of detail, because there are a lot of categories within some of the major categories of the chart of accounts that we have to follow. And so that's the second section that's there, is to drill down into what we call central administration, or function 2500. We're a little bit high on a percentage basis within that category when we look at our comparable districts. But there's so many various areas in there, so everything from human resources and payroll and purchasing, our finance and accounts payable individuals, as well as our technology folks, all reside within that one function. So in what area within that function would be helpful for us to know more about. And then turning to the second page, looking specifically at school administration and school front office staffing, and seeing how we compare again with the marketplace in that particular area of our budgeting. And then special education programming and staffing. This is actually a very large area, so we're going to just touch on the surface of this for a number of reasons. One reason is there's one of our neighboring school districts is actually commissioning some work themselves, in which we are going to be a comparable district, and for our participation, they are willing to share the information that they are going to gather. And so instead of incurring the cost for us to duplicate that work, we do want to provide a little bit more information than what they're looking for. So we do have that area covered within this scope, but we're also going to rely on some additional information that would be a result of, again, a neighboring school district that's going to commission, they already have commissioned the study with the same firm, by the way, Heinfield Meacham Company. Turning to page 3, nursing staffing. This is an area that we have some challenges filling vacancies, so we'd like to get a little more information about that. Certified teacher staffing, just in terms of class size, things of that nature, and compensation in general. We'd love to glean some more information as a result of this study regarding that. General administration, function 2300. This is areas of the superintendent's office as well as the governing board, just to be able to make sure that we've checked all the boxes when it comes to administration. So we have central administration, school administration, and now general administration covered with this. Transportation, which we feel is going to be a big area. We have, especially with the increases in minimum wage, we are seeing more and more difficulty filling bus driver positions. We have been made aware that some of our neighboring school districts may be making adjustments to bus driver salary because they're experiencing the same problems. So we want to make sure that we have additional information to make sure that we're not behind when it comes to being competitive within that area and need of our district. And so essentially those are the areas that we propose to do as part of this study. And this might be like a first phase of this, because these reports, as I have seen them produced over the years, they always seem to beg more questions. They do answer some questions, but it's difficult to be able to pinpoint information as a result of just a cursory look at a comparison. The reason for that, for example, is we may refer to a position as plant foreman, and they lead the facilities at our particular school sites. Somebody else may title that position completely different and might have a completely separate job skill set that is required and different responsibilities. And it might even be the same title. So they may call it plant foreman, and that person may have different credentials than our particular position. So just because we have the number of FTE, full-time equivalency within a title or a set position, or even the name of the title, doesn't necessarily tell you the whole story. So there's going to probably be additional information that we will want to glean, if not within these categories, maybe expanding the focus beyond this. We just thought this was a manageable scope to be able to address for this particular year, specifically targeting the highest need areas that we've identified as a district. To give you an idea, that we've not received a quote in terms of an estimate, but we have mentioned to them that our expectation would be to receive this along the April timeline, pending the board's formal approval of the scope, which can't happen this evening. Would likely be, the first opportunity would be on December 12th is the next regularly scheduled board meeting. But we think that the cost for this is a roughly $30,000 expense for the district, and we would expect the report sometime in the month of April based on this scope. Again, the reason for this being on the agenda this evening is to make sure that we're hitting the target, because a need has already been expressed as it's identified as a superintendent goal for this year. And I'll certainly grab a pen and get ready to describe what the dialogue will be from here.
Okay, since Ms. Ordway is winking so kindly,
I am blinking kindly.
we'll have Ms. Ordway go first.
Just call me Blinky. The categories that are here are categories that were discussed last year when we were talking about the raises, because we actually had money to do raises. Some of the things that the BLT talked about are on here, as well as DVESPA and DVEA. So this would be completed in April, and if there were, I'm just trying to figure out what the outcome would be if there were things that we were to add. Would we then be waiting to add them till the next fiscal year, or would we give ourselves room to add as needed? I'm just trying to figure out, I know the timing, you don't want to rush it, but I'm just trying to figure out how the timing would work for us, hiring anyway.
Yeah, President Fisher and Ms. Ordway, I think the timing does not lend itself well because we'll be well within the budget development or the salary and benefit recommendation by the month of April in order to do the open enrollment for employees and that. So as a potential suggestion, just knowing that, you know, the time needed to do the study can't really be collapsed without adding a great deal of expense to the project, that maybe we can make a reservation, as we did with this last budget cycle, to say, hey, let's hold aside X dollars to be able to address the most immediate needs that could exist. We might have, and I know I'm sticking my neck out a little bit here. We might have.
Okay, we like your neck.
We might have some indication early on, you know, where we have some major differences. If we're talking about, for example, like the IS&T change of designation program that was a topic of discussion last summer, that's going to be a small amount of dollars that we would need to reserve. If we're talking about having to adjust all of the bus driver salaries, we're going to have to reserve a greater sum of money. So one of the things that we can at least ask Heinfield and Meach to consider is those areas that are going to have the greatest expense, like teacher salary, bus drivers, where there's a large group of employees, that maybe they address those first and we at least get a preliminary indication of what the data is telling us, so that we can reserve the correct amount of money. I'd hate to reserve $1 million and only need to address, you know, a handful of employees with that. I mean, that wouldn't make sense.
Would this be information that we're going to share with the budget committee that's been formed, that we're having a efficiency study?
Again, yes, I think that it would be something that we want to share with them. We do have data that helped us identify these areas. And that information will be shared with the budget committee. In fact, a week from yesterday, that information is going to start to be shared with them. The actual committee itself is scheduled for 4 meetings, the last meeting being the February 5th date, I believe, is the date for the last meeting. So the report may not be done by then, but we are going to share comparative data that helped us develop the list that you see today within the scope.
And I just have one more question. With the looking at the FTEs in different areas, would that be something that you would then discuss with NST? Because I'm just going to pick the assistant principal dean portion, front office staff. That was an ask that went unanswered by the building leadership team. So how would that then be part of, or would it be part of their conversation?
President Fisher and Ms. Ordway, so there is a work group right now that is working on a recommendation for front office staffing, and so we haven't delayed or postponed any of the practices that would be routine for us in anticipation of this. This will just provide additional information for other adjustments that we may want to make that could exist for next school year or in a future school year if again the timing doesn't work out. But at least we'll have some information to give us an idea where those areas are that we need to make adjustments. Even if it doesn't happen for 2018-19, it could happen in a future year. But again, just to reiterate, there is a work group currently working on a change to school administration staffing, and they're nearing. Well, I don't want to speak for the group because I don't sit on that group, but I know they met already this week. I think they meet again Thursday, so they are working diligently on trying to come up with a recommendation.
I just think it's such a good message for all of our employee groups, because they will see on that list for the efficiency study that there's a chunk of things that they have and had asked for in the last few years. It's popping up, so I think it's good that we're going to embark on looking at it. Thank you.
May I introduce, I want to reattach his neck. He might be sticking it out there far, because I thought he is correct that we'll be starting to get information, but I remember this came from my board goals, which started later because I was newly hired and we were just figuring out which direction we wanted to point the boat. So, so we were down the trail. I don't think, from my perspective, I'm thinking taking the long-term approach. That Jim is correct that we're going to ask more questions. We're probably going to have more questions than we have answers. I've done this a couple times. So what's going to happen is, this is April, and we're going to start digging more and more, and it'll be May and June. You're already on top of a budget. So it'd be awesome if we can get some valuable stuff to it, but I wouldn't set my expectations too high. I'm thinking more long-term approach versus the short-term.
Well, I know we keep referencing the superintendent's goals, and that there may be a component of that in here. But the original efficiency study was brought when we took office. It was the very first thing that I asked that we do, and then we took it down and limited the scope to district office administration because we were flattening the organization at the time, because we had absolutely no money. And so we limited the scope of the initial efficiency study, and we got the report back. Some of the work within that efficiency study was in progress, or changes where things were moving. I think overall we would need to understand, was everything that was included in that original efficiency study completed, or are there any parts that are still pending? Are they some that we elected not to take the recommendation of the audit firm? But then we did go into discussing the potential of joining in with, I believe it was Peoria, to do the additional study. But I think it's multiple things. Yes, you may there may be a superintendent goal part that this would provide information for, but the efficiency study and its follow-up are far beyond that. They're more of a long-term planning. So I would kind of like to have those, at least for me, be somewhat separate, because this is not his goal. This has been going since 2015. January or February is when we first started talking about this. So I guess I'm not confused on what it is we're trying to get to. Are we going to approve going on to the next scope? I know we had discussed it, and then I think it died about a year ago. But do we know what data they're going to provide from Peoria or from Dysart, whichever one it was? And then is any of this going to be a duplicate of the data analysis program that ASBO is doing? Is there a potential that that is another component that we're possibly not considering in here? Are we members of the data analysis project?
President Fisher, it's interesting that you asked that question. We were a charter member of the data collection project more than a decade ago. When that project no longer had value to us, we stopped our participation in the data collection project while ASBO decided to revamp the program. And just 2 weeks ago, We have renewed our interest in joining the data collection project, specifically because we understand that they have general ledger detail level information from a number of school districts, and that will allow us to get to some of the detail that I spoke of within that function 2500 central administration that isn't publicly available. And so we are in the process of issuing the purchase order. I will tell you that there was a concession that needed to be made, and I do have to join the SHIELD team as
I will laugh as I see you at
as a concession to help share the information that we use to compare ourselves with other districts, so that they can help build other reports for districts to use universally instead of just for Deer Valley. And that's I joke about this only because there's a commitment of time to that, but there is a value that will be raised from that. That information, we've already talked to Heinfeld Meaching Company about using our access to that information to be able to incorporate it in the report so that we're not creating more work for them to provide information that we can get otherwise. But the level of detail that we're looking at here goes beyond what the data collection project can currently do in terms of providing comparative information.
Okay. The other question that I would pose, or that I would have from back in my HR days, we did job studies on our own internally. Is there a portion of this that we have staff that would do internally, or do we really require that Heinfeld and Meach come in and do the job studies completely? I'm just trying to get a scope of the cost between this data analysis project, the efficiency, the second stage of the efficiency review based on their recommendation, and internal resources. Was that considered at all?
President Fisher, yes. So we did have a conversation about, because it was previously mentioned, I believe, by you, regarding, kind of a job study analysis within our own staff. I think we have the ability to do some of that, but I think that there would be always a question as to maybe the validity of the information if it was done internally. And so that's why we talked with the firm of Heinfeld Meaching Company, because they did the initial efficiency study, just to get a sense of what the cost would be. And that's why we're able to share with you I'm giving it a very rough ballpark number of about $30,000. And to be able to say, the trade-off would be there's staff time that would need to be done to be able to do that work. That wouldn't that's already a sunk cost because we're already paying for them. But to get some credibility that it's a third party that's providing that information, we thought the $30,000 was a reasonable expense to have that work be borne by somebody else that would add that added sense of credibility.
I do agree. I just wanted that publicly noted, because it unfortunately, when you do it internally, sometimes the doubt is there, unless the person who you're talking to, you gave them exactly what they wanted. So sometimes that is there. Yes, Ms. Tweedy.
I just had a couple questions, and it might just be a typo, but thank you, because this looks really complete, and it looks like everything we've talked about. And I just noticed that on certified staffing, we have turnover rate, but we don't have turnover rate for transportation or IS&T. I'm thinking there might be a value, because even if we're comparable to other districts, but we have a higher than acceptable turnover rate, and so do they, we might have to tweak something to lower, because the turnover rate has other expenses in training in all departments when you lose someone.
Yeah, and I think that is just an oversight on our part, so I appreciate you bringing it up. We have had some lengthy conversations about whether or not we want to use turnover rate or retention either way, it's the same information. I think it just has a different connotation to it, right? Maybe a little more positive to say retention rate as opposed to turnover rate. But either way, I did make a note that we would add that to the scope under at least transportation as well.
Hey, Ms. Frank and then Ms.
Oh,
Ordway.
can I just finish what I was saying, or?
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were done.
Oh,
Oh.
I just wanted you to add I think all the work group.
That's what
anyone
I
in
meant.
there,
Turnover
yeah.
rate is
Anybody
good,
that's in there, we should
or
be looking at
retention rate, but either way.
Oh,
They should add up to 100, right?
So you're saying universally, and yeah, universally the turnover or retention rate should be added to all the categories? Is that what I'm hearing?
I would like.
Unless it adds a substantial expense, but it would give us an idea. And if the salary and compensation's the same, but the retention rate's different, and then maybe we have to look at something else. Or if the salaries match and they have a low retention rate also, then we might want to do something differently than our peers. And I guess the only other question I had is, are we definitely using this firm, or did we do a bid to see what the costs are?
President Fisher, Ms. Tweedy, no, we're not definitely using them. And just, so let me jump ahead just in terms of process. Tonight's, so I have to give credit where credit is due. Ms. Karen Smith actually wrote the scope. We actually provided the information. She's actually the author of this, but it's our words that she was able to compile. And the reason for that, that we reached out to her, is because it was an extension of an efficiency study where we would be able to parlay the work that she's already done from the initial study. We think if we were to commission somebody else, there would be an added expense to get them up to speed, although they would have the access to the report. We did not do a bid for this, but they are on a cooperative contract that we can acquire their services. In terms of the process, we wanted to make sure that we get the scope refined so that we can get an actual quote or estimate. It's not going to necessarily be a bid at this point in time, again, because it's on a cooperative contract, but we want to bring that hard number back to you on the December 12th agenda for the board to formally approve, and then that would commission this, again, pending the discussion from this evening.
Okay, Ms. Frank.
Under certified teacher, I would like to see a comparison of performance pay plans. I know different districts do it differently. In addition to comparing the amount of 301 monies that are awarded to teachers and how that's done, I think if we want to remain competitive in terms of attracting and retaining employees, this is an area we should look at. And we may want to look at that for certified as well, not just for, or classified, I'm sorry, not just for certified.
Yeah, I would actually say all groups.
All groups, yeah.
Because different districts are doing different things.
Yeah, in my experience, I'm sorry, President Fisher, Ms. Frank, my experience is performance pay for non-certified staff is fairly rare. I mean, it exists, but not at the level or magnitude of our plan, because everybody that's not, that doesn't receive Classroom Site Fund performance pay is included in our district performance pay plan. But we can certainly ask that question. I think it's not going to be as extensive as you're going to find that the Classroom Site Fund exists everywhere, right? I mean, obviously it's in statute, but thank you. That I did note that as well. So add classified performance pay in as well.
Okay. Ms. O'Brien?
I just want to, and maybe I just not finding it, but the counselors and the psychologists, where will they fall?
President Fisher, Ms. O'Brien, that's a great question. So the neighboring school district that's actually performing we call it other professional salary scheduled employees. Other people use different terms, including supplemental services, speech, occupational therapy, and whatnot. That district is doing that study, and they're going to use us as a comparable district because we are their neighbor. And so we think that information we're going to be able to glean from that report and not necessarily have to pay Heinfield and Meach to perform that work for us. Now, we don't have any control over that scope, by the way. So what we might learn, and they've already made the request of our data, so they've already commissioned Heinfield Meaching Company to do their work, but we don't know what that. We don't know what the scope of the work is and what the report's going to look like. So, as I mentioned, this is probably like phase one of a salary benefit analysis. If that report doesn't satisfy our needs, we may have to include that in a future scope to be able to say, hey, we want to drill, we want to follow suit with what we did with our own scope that we had, that we actually helped create. To provide the same information for that group as well. But in the interim, just as a cost-saving measure, because we know we're going to go through the exercise with this neighboring district, that we thought that we would save the expense of including it in this scope.
Okay, as long as we haven't lost them in and amongst all of our different employee groups. I do appreciate that, Mr. Miglorino. And then the performance pay review, because I just want to understand with timing and with the Prop 301 potentially sunsetting. So we're in the 2017-2018 school year. This information would come to us around May potentially. So we may or may not be able to implement it for what is affect the 2018-2019 school year, and then what is left is the 2019-2020. That would be in effect the last year of Prop 301. No, there's one more year.
One more. 2021 will be the last year.
2021. Okay, so there could be two more years. So I just, in using our funds, I'm just trying to think out loud, because we don't know what will happen with what the future of those funds are, and I'm not sure if that adds a significant scope to that part of the study or not. I certainly understand what your concern, Ms. Frank, and I'm sorry, I'm kind of thinking out loud and wanting to talk this through with the rest of you to make sure that that may or may not be a necessary thing, given how close we are to the end of the current Prop 301.
But if it were to be renewed by the voters and we had no information on what other districts have done in the past, I think it would still be useful to have that information going forward.
Well, or also consider I know in theory everybody knows this is happening. There's a lot of talk about it, both within the industry and peripherally outside. Having it documented may provide additional ammunition, I hate to use that word, but to encourage the passing of the renewal. And I don't know if that would, I'm not sure that it would. I mean, there's people, supporters are going to support, and those who aren't. But
I'm just thinking out loud, because I don't know if it will be we don't know if it will be a renewal. We don't know if it will be an entirely
or an increase to the one from the point.
Right. I just a discussion, and I don't know what the magnitude of adding something. Maybe I should start with that question. Is that do you think a large ad, not a big deal ad, in your professional opinion, Mr. McGreevy?
President Fisher, Ms. O'Brien, I believe there's a significant part to performance pay, depending on what level of detail I think if you want just an overview of the plan itself, like what's the criteria to award performance pay, I think that's a little easier to get at. The more detail that you're looking for, obviously the more work is involved. But I also, just my opinion again, I believe that anything that is going to be a continuation or replacement of the Classroom Site Fund as we know it is probably going to have a performance pay component to it moving forward. That's purely speculation on my part, but I think it adds a level of accountability that people like. and there may be some political reasons to want to include something like that, to be able to, again, ask the voters to approve something like that. Again, that's just my opinion, but I think if we were just asking what the criteria to qualify and what the amount is, I think that's not a huge addition to the scope.
And was that what you were interested in, Ms. Frank?
I think an overview compared to overview from other districts. I mean, we may look at that overview and say, hey, we'd like more details, but I think we at least need to start with a baseline.
Okay, thank you. I just
Yeah.
wanted clarification. Thank you very much.
And thank you for your comments.
Any other discussion on this one? So moving forward, then you're gonna bring more details specifically to the next meeting for approval.
Yes, President Fisher, so the next steps, we'll make some updates to the scope based on the comments, really just adding either turnover rate or retention rate to all of the categories, and then adding comparison of performance pay plans for both the certified and classified or non-certificated individuals, and we'll also be able to provide a more firm cost for the plan, and we will have that on the December 12th agenda for your formal consideration.
Okay.
I was wondering if we answered Ms. Tweedy's question about whether we go with this firm or not. I don't think we really answered that. We just thought that it would be a cost savings because they had done the previous study. Are you suggesting that we get another opinion? I don't know if we answered your question or not.
I was curious because it just sounded like, but I was thinking just because of the expense, it wouldn't be bad to ask other people. I mean, I'm assuming what you're saying because they've already done one, they're going to come in cheaper, but it just seems like given the dollar amount, you would, I don't know.
By procurement standards, it's within the scope to use an already cooperative agreement, so we don't by law have to. My concern with going out to bid, which you can always go out to bid, is the cost of the bid. Additionally, even though they would have access to the report, it's kind of like a lawyer that's going to, they will look at the opinion of other lawyers in the scope of their work, but they're going to do their work because they have to own it. And this is the same thing. This is a CPA firm. This is an audit firm. So while they would look at the scope of what Heinfeld and Meach has already done, they're going to have to significantly start over. And my fear would be that cost
So I'm assuming they're
would double.
Well, I think it would, and then we wouldn't use them. But
But the cost of the bid
think
would
it
also
just-
be there. Yeah.
I just think it looks more fiscally responsible to, if you're going to spend $30,000. I mean, if no other board member agrees with me, then I mean, it's not something I'm going to.
What would be the cost of a bid?
Total cost of time. What would be the?
President Fisher, I believe I don't have a firm dollar amount. I think maybe more important than the cost would be the time, and it would take a minimum of 6 weeks for us to put a bid together.
Never mind.
I have one. Jim, what is a normal average bid for a job like this? I mean, if you have that number in your head somewhere.
Just so I understand the question, the cost,
Well,
cost to
No.
actually put
If we were, what would this service that we're looking for, what would an average, what would the baseline for that be?
Oh, okay. I think I understand
I'm
the question better. I thought you were
I'm not
referring to
blinking.
our expense of doing a bid, and that's the beauty of using a cooperative contract. It's already been bid, right? So it is already a competitive price because it's been bid on a cooperative contract,
Right.
and so they're typically service contracts like this are based on like an hourly equivalency, and so what they do is they actually determine they estimate how many hours it's going to take them to do the work, and then they just do the math at that point in time. So it's already because it's a cooperative contract, it's already a competitive price because it was bid when it was awarded to the cooperative, the lead district, if you will.
Right, and I didn't know if.
So
if
there
we-
was a bidding process in the past. That's, I guess I would feel better. And then, so we're just expanding upon the work they've already done, but they have already, you've compared bids. We didn't just already on this service.
President Fisher, Ms.
Not
Tweedy,
this
that is correct.
Okay.
And can I just, Jim, could you just maybe one more time just explain what the cooperative is? A co-op is?
Certainly. So a cooperative, purchasing cooperative, there is a lead district that is involved. They actually write a scope, just like we would do if we were going to do our own bid, and they actually make the award on a larger scale for members of the cooperative. We're a member of several cooperatives, and so they actually do the bid, open the bid, and make an award, just like we would do if we were bidding it. They just do it in advance of work that's going to be done for any of the members of the cooperative. So there is a bid that's done for a bid or request for qualifications. In this case, I'm almost certain, I haven't done the due diligence, but I'm sure it was a request for qualifications, because in this case, you're not looking for best price, you're looking for somebody qualified to do the work. And price is one of the things that
It's not typical education bidding, right?
Yeah, but no, there was a formal process in making the award. So it's good point.
So for me, that portion of it, the fact that they've done the original and they're familiar with it, that it's time sensitive, I'm good to go with however we are.
And it would have been, in the case of audit firms like this, it spirals. It goes, because they rotate and do the bid again. Okay. We have salary and benefits. Are we going to do anything with benefits, or is this the scope of that one item?
It was just the scope of that one item
Okay.
that we wanted to have a discussion, and then again, we'll bring that back to the board on the 12th to
All right.
formalize.
Thank
Do you
you.
want, again, hate to belabor this, but we added a few things.
Hmm?
Do you want him to get the cost of this piece of paper and then the additional, just in case it goes to 50, for example? Then we scrap the whole project. We might want to know some increments.
I think it's always useful to have more information than less information and to have options. So I think that's a good suggestion.
Karen could pop it out pretty quick.
Yep. That's fine. I'm happy to provide that.
Okay.
We will all read it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think better yet, we're going to have Miss Ordway read it into a recorder, and we'll all just listen
That would be fabulous. I'll use my
with her
drama
rock and roll voice. That's right.
With my rock and roll voice. I don't know. It won't be here next week.
Occasionally, you got to go like this while you're recording, and we'll just picture it. Sorry. Okay. Agenda process review. Mr. Miglerino, is that you, or is that Dr. Galligan?
I believe it's me, and I believe it's addenda processing changes.
Did I say agenda? Oh,
You
I
did
meant
say
addenda.
agenda.
They're cousins.
No, yes. So this evening, I'm going to share some information that we previously shared with you, but just to give you an update where we're at, because we have mentioned this previously, we've had some discussions with our school administrators, and we're in the process of implementing some changes that quite frankly, are going to require a lot of work on a lot of people's time. And so we just want to make sure that we're still hitting the mark for the expectation of the board. Because if there's a different way to do this, we would welcome that opportunity as well. We are well on our way to try and implement what we're going to share this evening. But I'm, again, sticking my neck out a little bit. But if we're able to modify it to reduce the burden, I'm sure nobody's going to object. And I'll just throw that out as a teaser, I guess. So we'll just talk a little bit about addenda in general, identify some of the concerns that we've heard from the governing board regarding addenda, and then share with you what the new procedure is, and talk about some of the key takeaways that we've shared with the building level principals, some strategies, that we thought would help implement the new procedures, and then just open it up for discussion for the governing board to provide additional input. As a reminder, we do have addenda. We think that we're not trying to do away with addenda. We are trying to, I'm going to use the word standardize the addenda. I don't know if that's the right terminology or not, but anything that's paid in excess of $999 is on the form of an addenda. Anything under $1,000 is paid on extra duty pay. These are for tasks that are performed that are not part of somebody's existing responsibilities of their contract. They are considered kind of at-will employment agreements or one-year positions. We're starting to use the terminology term-specific with no right of continuation. So there's not a guarantee that for any addenda, but we do have that listed as a concern from the board. You'll see that in an upcoming slide. We do have two types of addenda, right? We have IBN addenda, which stands for interest-based negotiation, and they are prescribed to us, so they are already standardized in the certified manual. And then we have non-IBN addenda, again, that just not there isn't a prescribed dollar amount or list of addenda, so there's no uniformity, if you will. Again, some examples. So all of our coaching pay, hard-to-fill addenda, club sponsors, department chairs, and whatnot, those are all IBN addenda prescribed in the certified manual. The non-IBN addenda would be like grant-funded positions, our online instruction, the DVOLP program, some of our extracurricular and co-curricular activities, if they need additional help because of maybe the popularity or size of a particular activity. We have some position-based addenda, people that have a role, we want to have them work a certain extra number of days or a particular role that they serve within the organization. Those are examples of non-IBN addenda. So the current process is that the school completes some addenda paperwork. We list it on the governing board. The board makes a determination as to whether or not they're approved. If they're approved, we process it within the paperwork that they submit to us. So for the IBN addenda, those are all, again, standardized because they're already prescribed. But the non-IBN addenda, and I think one of the areas that we've heard as a concern is that the non-IBN addenda, there are variations that exist. So that kind of leads us into the concerns that we heard from the governing board that we wanted to address in the new process that we developed. And that was that sometimes the board is making a decision after the addenda work has either already started or in some cases have been completed. And so that puts the board in a difficult position to be able to not approve it if the work had already began. Some of the expectations for the addendum weren't necessarily clear. The information that we provided to the governing board had just a title, and sometimes those titles could be the exact same title or be very similar but have different amounts. Again, some inconsistency in some of the amounts, so might see an assistant widget maker at one school making $500 and an assistant widget maker at another school making $250 on an addenda, so there was some inconsistency in the amounts. And there needed to be a balance between allowing the individuals that were effectively performing this addenda work to continue to do it from time period to time period, but also making sure that everybody had an opportunity to be considered for an addenda as well. The example that we use typically is our varsity sport coaching addenda. We typically, as long as they're meeting our expectations, we would like to continue them in those roles unless there was a reason not to, for some reason, either theirs or ours. Again, there is no right of continuation with these agreements anyhow, these employment agreements, but we certainly know that some of these key positions that are paid via addenda, we want them to have some sense of security as well, that they are they are going to continue in that role from year to year. And that external candidates shouldn't be considered if we have internal candidates that can fill those positions. So those were some of the concerns that we heard from the governing board. And so we developed these changes. And this includes that a written job description would be developed for all addenda, both IBN addenda and non-IBN addenda. That doesn't exist today. And we have some of these in place, but not for all positions, not for all addenda positions. And we went one step further with this in making sure that the job description itself not only had specific responsibilities identified at key times of the work that's being requested within the addenda, but it also had a means of being able to determine how the amount would be calculated. So if there was ever a question, we could reference back to the job description to be able to provide for some uniformity. And that wouldn't mean that all the addenda with the same title would have the same name. I think my poster child here happens to be our 21st Century Grant. It's based on certain factors within the grant, so the amount could change for the same addenda, but it's going to be driven by a formula, and that formula would determine the amount. And so that's, we've provided for that option to be included within the job description. And that would be true not just of the 21st Century Grant, but others as well. Could be based on the number of students that are being served, such as is the case with our online program. The DVUSD program is based on the number of students in the class, signed up for the class. So the job description is a key element. I will tell you that even though I mentioned that we're working on implementing this now, we will not have all the job descriptions written coming out of the chute for all the addenda. It's a concerted effort that we are going to make. We'll develop a work team to work on the IBN addenda, because instead of every school trying to determine what their varsity basketball addenda job description should be, there should be one job description for varsity basketball coach, and that we could just get agreement upon several individuals, so that we're not writing five different addenda for each of those positions, or job descriptions for each of those addenda positions. So the second bullet is that the school or department would submit for pre-approval of non-IBN addenda. We had this when we first presented this back in September. We said that we were going to bring all addenda for pre-approval to the board. Through the discussion that we had at that point in time, we changed that to be non-IBN addenda for the sole purpose that, again, the IBN addenda are already prescribed in the certified manual. So they're kind of pre-approved already, if you will. This is the area that is creating the most amount of work for everybody right now, is the pre-approval process. And I would contend that once the job descriptions are all written, the pre-approval process would be less required. Doesn't mean that we couldn't do it, and we might become very adept at doing it by the time we get all the job descriptions written, because it's going to take some time to do that. But I'll just mention that once we have at least the job descriptions written, and human resources will be the kind of the gatekeeper to make sure the job description actually does match with the work that's being done, so that there is an approval process for all job descriptions, and human resources is the department that takes care of that. On the pre-approval process, we are suggesting that we would take or bring those forward to the governing board twice a year for the bulk of the ones that are going to be, I'll call them known addenda. Again, remember, this is pre-approval, so it's just the non-IBN addenda. We do the first semester, or those that are known in advance that are going to last the entire year. We would bring those to the governing board in June, the first meeting in June, so that they would be pre-approved for anything that would start from July and continue either through December or potentially through the entire school year. And then in December, we would bring the second semester, again, the known non-IBN addenda to the board, so that you would be able to pre-approve that these addenda are going to be filled. And that would include the summer months as well. But that wouldn't be the only time that we would bring the pre-approval to the governing board. There could be on an as-needed basis. So if somebody did not get something pre-approved at either the June or December pre-approval, which the bulk of them would come at those times, that we would do a pre-approval at any of the other governing board meetings for the as-needed basis. But we have been explicit in letting the schools and departments know that in no case would the work start before the pre-approval. So if the board wasn't going to consider approving it, we wouldn't want the work to start. So again, the onus is on us to be much more thoughtful about what those non-IBN addenda are going to be, and to do some planning in advance to make sure that the board is the amount of time necessary to get that pre-approval process in front of the board to consider has to be part of the consideration for those people that are seeking to get these non-IBN addenda approved. And then the process looks very similar to what we did in the past. They still complete the paperwork. We would still bring those addenda back to you because during the pre-approval process, we might not have all the information. We might not know who's going to fill the position. So we'd be asking you in the pre-approval process to be able to say, yes, I need a second softball assistant coach. I'll just use a spring sport. But I don't know who that person is yet, so we're approving the addenda position. We would bring back, just like we do now, the actual name and the amount in what you are familiar with in the approval of addenda. And then the one change that, the last change here is that that we would incorporate an evaluation as part of completing the addenda process. And I say that that's new because we've incorporated it in the actual form itself, but the actual act of evaluating addenda is already prescribed to us in the certified manual. So we don't need to change anything, we just need to change the practice of what we're doing. We are, just in full disclosure, we are going to manage by exception. So what I mean by that is that we're going to, by default, assume that the addenda are in good standing unless the supervisor that authorized the addenda actually provides notice to us that the addenda is not in good standing. So that's how we intend to do the evaluation component of this new process, if you will. And then what we mentioned to the school building level administrators was that the key takeaways are that job descriptions are going to be required for all addenda, and that includes IBN and non-IBN addenda. And again, this document is a little more extensive than what we currently have, and we, again, have some IBN addenda that are in the new format. Some IBN and non-IBN addenda job descriptions are already in the new format. So we do have a start, but we have a long way to go in terms of getting all those job descriptions created. Again, pre-approval before the work starts is going to be required for all non-IBN addenda, and then the evaluation is now part of that paperwork. So those are some of the key takeaways that we shared with them. And then we shared some additional strategies, which I've kind of covered already. There's a benefit to working collaboratively on a similar job description. So if we know that every school has, Dr. Finch mentioned band, we have several non-IBN addenda when it comes to band because of the size of our band programs. So there's a benefit for those folks getting together and, again, not writing individual job descriptions that would be specific to a campus, but maybe making a generic job description that would fit more than one school. We have suggested that if there's a question about whether or not they're going to have a non-IBN addenda and we're going to go through the pre-approval, we're suggesting to the schools to err on the side of getting it pre-approved because there wouldn't be any penalty if they received a pre-approval of addenda that they decided not to fill. But it would just at least announce to the governing board that that is potentially being filled as a position. And then when it comes to the dollar amount, because we're having them estimate that in this pre-approval process, we're asking them to estimate that on the high side, especially for those that may be formulaically derived. Again, I'll use our online program. We don't know how many students have signed up for a particular summer program, but we know that we're going to offer a summer course. We might estimate that the class is going to be, I'll just make up a number, 25 students, even though it might only have 15 in it. But again, the pre-approval, we won't pay off the pre-approval budget amount. We're going to pay when the actual paperwork is submitted, when we know more information, including the specific amount and the person to fill that position. We're going to manage this. We're already starting to manage this with a Google Doc that the schools have access to. And there's just a worksheet within a very simple Google Doc that has every school listed on it, and they're just listing all of those pre-approvals, and we intend to take that information and compile that for the board to consider, again, with the first consideration of pre-approval being the December 12th board meeting. Here's just an example of what that spreadsheet looks like, a screenshot, if you will. The color coding there is used to be able to identify those things that are required for pre-approval, and the columns that are going to be required for the information for the actual payment of the addenda. So you see there's a pre-approval date, and a board approval date for the actual amount. And there'd be an actual addenda amount and a budget amount that would exist for each record line there, which would indicate an addenda. Obviously, those are names I made up. I don't think we have a test case employee.
There's no happy-go-lucky?
There might be a happy-go-lucky.
What about holly-go-lightly?
I cannot confirm nor deny that we have a happy-go-lucky employee. Again, so that's really kind of the gist of it. And because there is a great deal of work going into creating the pre-approval process, we thought it would be a great time to share what our plans were, because the last time we talked about this was at the end of September. So I'll open it up for discussion.
Ms. Tweedy.
I just had 2 quick points. I think 2 big concerns I have in terms with the pre-approval. I mean, it's one thing to have an addenda title and a job description for people to attach to, but we need to make sure if we're paying certain employees for doing something, we're paying everyone who does that. So it either is, if they've signed identical contracts, like a teacher, then their professional expectations that would fall under that contract would be identical with everyone else who signed the contract that had the same exact words. So if, like, we paid a team lead, anything they did, if we've deemed that not a professional responsibility, then everyone who does that needs to get paid. You can't pay people unequitably. You have to either pay them or... So it's not a matter of having it. It's if we do decide certain things fall outside the realm of professional responsibility, we need to pay everyone who does those responsibilities. The second thing, when we have a job title like course builder, could we have a criteria for when it's necessary to build a course? Like if you teach the same course, I mean, I'm a teacher. If I teach the same course twice in a row, I'm not redesigning the course the second time I'm teaching this, more or less. I mean, unless something huge changes. So I would like to better understanding as to when it's necessary to redesign a course.
President Fisher, Ms. Tweedy, I think one of the things that at least is our expectation, and again, I don't know, we've never done this before, so I can't give you any guarantees or assurances, but it is our expectation that the job description is going to answer both of those concerns, especially with the course builder, because there would be a job description for course builder that would establish what is required of the course builder. So that criteria that you're looking for would be embedded in the job description, and we would make all those job descriptions available to everybody, right? So everybody would know. In terms of the professional expectations that you mentioned, this is a little bit of a philosophy change for us as an organization, not one person individually, but we have allowed the autonomy to exist at the campuses to make some of those decisions. But again, I think because the job descriptions are going to have to be written in such a way that human resources is going to review them, that those responsibilities are going to have to be outside of what is customary or already included in somebody who could fill that role. And that hasn't existed before because, again, we haven't had job descriptions for many of the addenda, especially the non-IBN addenda. So our hope is that the job description process and that requirement is going to address both of those concerns. If it doesn't, we created a new process because of the concerns that we've heard regarding addenda. We are open to implementing additional modifications to the addenda processing process, if that's not too redundant, if we know it doesn't meet those concerns or meet the expectations of the governing board.
Just kind of off of that, my concern isn't just that the job description is going to say a math course builder is going to build a math course. The job description would be the same. My concern would be that we have a math course builder that builds a course in January, and then we have a different math course builder that builds a course in March, and then a math course builder that builds a course in August. And how many math courses do we have to, it's more of a criteria of, are we just building courses to build courses? When we could have utilized the course that was originally built in January. So that, I think that's a different scope as far as what that would be. But one of the other concerns that came up is when you have an addenda that's going to an employee whose job title is identical to the addenda you're about to give them. And my concern is, and I know Dr. Finch had mentioned the potential of adjusting job descriptions or positions. If it's in the scope of their position already, why would we be giving them an addenda for that? And what have we done to address that? Are we including some of the addendas where we have, widget builder who, that is their overall job title, they're on a 9, 10, or 12-month contract, and then we're also going to give them an addenda for widget in January, and then they're going to have a secondary a widget building addenda for the summertime, and then a third widget building for the fall semester. And because their job title is already widget builder and they're building widgets, so have we done anything to look at, is all addenda that's currently being paid or put into a job description for addenda, is that already included in someone's job? And the reason I say that is because, to Ms. Tweedy's point, and you're correct, the autonomy's always been out there where, school A pays for this duty. School B does not pay for this duty. There's still an employee doing it, but school B doesn't pay for it. And then you get to where you have someone at school C who that is their job, is to do that duty. That's what they get paid. That's what their contract is. But because school A is paying them, school C is going to also pay them an addenda. So my concern is that, it's wonderful to have that job description, and I don't ever want to take away that autonomy from our campuses to run their campus, but there's also a fiscal responsibility, and then there's a responsibility to our staff, to our people. Whereas if we're going to pay you to do a financial report, but then we're going to require Dr. Galligan do a financial report, and she's not going to get paid for it in addition. So we're looking for that. I think, at least for me, I'm looking for that consistency. But I'm also looking for the realistic, I don't want to pay an addenda to a bus driver for driving the bus. Because that's part of it, you know, that's part of their job.
So, yeah, so
That makes
President,
sense.
yeah, President Fisher, it does make sense, and it's something that that we heard and tried to address with again the job description, because actually failed to be able to provide the form itself to you, which I think may have helped explain this. The form is very detailed in the job description, requiring specific tasks to be identified. And so, again, human resources is going to be our gatekeeper here to be able to say, if somebody says, in your example, you know, the widget maker is getting paid to make more widgets, it has to be outside of their scope of work. So I'm not saying that we wouldn't have an addenda that would be a widget maker addenda, but it would be outside of the scope that would that is in their normal job now, whether that be additional days if they were a 10-month widget maker and we're going to extend their time into the summer. We sometimes do that for fiscal reasons, the fiscal benefits of the organization, so we don't pick up additional.
Outside of contract, correct?
I'm sorry?
That's outside of contract.
Yeah,
If we're
outside of
gonna-
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what we can certainly say, again, not maybe flattering for us, is that we don't have a job description for every addenda. So there's no way for us to be able to verify what you're asking. You know, are we paying, I think the question, and it might have been rhetorical, is are we paying addenda for people that are currently have that responsibility within their current job assignment? We can't evidence that to you because we don't have a job description for the addenda. Okay. We do have a job description for every position that people are holding, but this new requirement is going to require us to have those specific details in the job description for the addenda now, too.
Now, one other thing, playing devil's advocate the other direction, are we also being cognizant that we are not stepping on the famous line in every job description I've ever written or seen, other duties as assigned? Because there are times that there will be other duties as assigned, and they're not part of a, well, no, that's indentured servant to that administrators. But how can I say it? Like if I give my secretary an extra job to do, she's going to work overtime. She will be paid time and a half past her regular schedule. I'm not going to give her an addenda. I just gave her an extra duty. It's not. So I also don't want to step on that aspect of the ability to run the organization in a responsible way. Have we considered that at all?
President Fisher, yes, we have, and so we still have the extra duty pay option, right, up to $1,000 for something, and there is not a formal process for the board to approve those extra duty pays, and we process a number of those, to be quite frank with you, again, the job description itself is going to have to be detailed enough. And we're going to rely on human resources as they approve the addenda, again, in advance of the work happening, that information is descriptive enough to be able to warrant what is being asked for in the amount that's being paid as relative to that addenda. So it is kind of a big ask because we've never had this process embedded in the addenda process, but we think it actually provides the missing link that we had to be able to answer that question. Yes, this is being, and I don't know if consistency is the right word because there's a philosophical component to that, but certainly standardized for sure is what we're looking for.
If I can add too, when you mentioned the concept of flattening the organization at the district office level. What happens when you flatten something is it goes out. And so what I think happened when, just what I've learned in the 4 or 5 months I've been here, that all that stuff that we flattened that went out, I think addenda followed those job duties because you were at your desk doing this box and then we gave you another box. And so my point is that as I learn more, I'll be looking at a reorg as well and bringing up those concepts to say, no, that is now in your current, or going to be in your job, in that window would come where you could say, I don't want to do this anymore because it's too much or too little pay or whatever. But I think that process will be done over time.
I believe that's what Dr. Weitenheimer did and presented that when he
I think
did that
actually-
reorganization, or at least that's what he presented.
I think we've already found a couple situations where that the additional duties turned into addenda. And so that's what we're discovering through this process. We're also discovering the inconsistencies and I think you mentioned that several times. That's been an eye-opener as well. At different bands, for example, do different things. Different cheerleading groups do different things. And the more we want uniformity and standardization, the more it pops out at us. And that's actually a good thing. I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah, my only concern is, and you guys, whoever take it for what it is, when we flattened the organization, that was mostly at the upper levels of administration and administration as a whole. And I can see potentially where those duties squished. Having personally experienced it, we've had that discussion on my current position. But I also would really hate to see us evaluate that from the administrative level, because in the times of extreme, when we were, for no other way to say it, flat broke, and positions moved. I know that when Miss Redding took the outer office in the superintendent's office, she brought up a giant chunk of work with her to that desk, and it became a part of it. And then as she moved into a different office, it became a part of it. So that's the unfortunate movement in times of hardship. I would want to make sure that there's a consistent, that we are honoring all of our classified staff, and not exclusively looking at reorganizing at the administrative level versus at the hands-on doing the work level.
Yeah, I
So.
would agree that I'm basically talking classified here. Administrators, they get other duty as assigned all the time. That's part of the gig. So yeah, it's where the classified work went.
Kim, I think with the efficiency study, that might also help knowing what's extra, what's not extra. But I will tell you that when we started pushing things out in 2008, 2009, on and on and on, it was not just people in the district office. And those jobs or those tasks became part of the jobs with the hope that when that legislative body was going to feed us, that those people too would then be recognized with a salary increase instead of having it be an addenda. So what we also might be looking at is if this, the addenda is this, the person continues to do it and has done it for the last 4 years as part of their addenda, it may be their job, but at that point in time, they too need to be compensated for that extra thing. So I think we're talking about a lot more. Maybe, I mean, from what Jim, you and your work team are going to uncover, there's going to be all of that's going to come to the surface.
Right. I agree with you, Ms. Hordway, and I think that doing that, doing the efficiency study and the other in tandem is going to almost be required, because you're correct. What has become addenda may be in reality a part of, and it would catch those outliers. It's my belief that the entire board's goal is to be fair and equitable to all of our staff, and including teachers, classified, and administration.
A
Ms.
comment.
Ms. Frank.
Okay. I just wanted to say thank you for this process review. I realize it was a lot of work and a lot of people put a lot of time into it, and also it will be a lot of work to create the job descriptions, but I think at the end of the day, once that's done, it's really going to be a benefit to the district in terms of consistency and also in terms of the questions on the course builder, there must be a course catalog somewhere for the online. Right, so if we see math course builder coming up, maybe that's algebra 1, and the next one that comes up that just says math course builder is maybe algebra 2, as we're building those, it might be helpful to see the course catalog, and then we could maybe see where courses are being added. So we're not redesigning the same course over and over. If that makes sense, that would be helpful information to have.
Ms. O'Brien?
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. Jim, in the process, for Meglarino, it's getting late. In the process, you talked about the pre-approval happening, and doing it as a fail-safe, just even in case they don't use it, like we do with certified and classified staff now. Can a person be put into that and start the work before it is then approved by the board?
President Fisher, Ms. O'Brien, what we shared with the schools and departments is that they could not. So without having pre-approval, we did not want them to encumber any expense related with that.
If they've received the pre-approval. But so for
Oh,
example,
I'm sorry.
so the pre-approval for a softball coach has occurred, but then they find the person, but like we in October had only one meeting. So, the hiring occurs such that, softball starts at the end of October, but they can't get approval till November.
I apologize. I understand the question better. Yes, so that if it was pre-approved and fell within the amount and the work could start, and I don't know if you would use the term ratify, but the approval could happen after the work started if the pre-approval took place prior to to the work actually beginning.
Perfect. Thank you for clarifying that. I have one more question about the process of the evaluation and the positions being filled on a year-to-year basis. So, like the football coach, are we saying that every year those football coaches they're done and they're without a job and you got to reapply, and how is that? Because I am concerned about the continuity, not just in sports, but in other areas, with extracurricular activities, science club, and so forth.
President Fisher, Ms. O'Brien, yes. So what we propose is that there'd be an evaluation process at the end of the addenda process, and again, by default, it would be that it'd be in good standing unless the supervisor told us otherwise. And absent it, if it was in good standing, then they would continue in that position. But we are making certain that the supervisors understand that it is a responsibility for them to make that assessment, because that responsibility actually is already in the language, but we just didn't even have a process for them to let us know. So that's been happening in informal ways, in the previous way it was handled.
Okay, thank you for those clarifying answers.
Do you think as a board that there will ever be an emergency? Can you think of a scenario where we talked about this before, I think with travel, for example, which more or less has time on it. Do you ever think of a scenario where you would want to grant to the superintendent emergency, yada, yada, for 30 days or so we hit the next meeting? Can you think of a scenario where we would need something like that, where they would miss a softball trip to X, Y, or Z, or?
Well, I was going to
worry about
ask. I was going to ask that question, but I was going to wait until the job descriptions came out, because certainly on individual campuses, there will be, and I don't know what title you'll come up with it, but there will be a need that is just for that campus that will need an addenda. So I was waiting to find out what you would call that, because then that would lend to what you just said, Dr. Finch, to make sure we don't have that type of thing. Like, I mean, I don't know, you get a grant and it's handed to you and you have to have somebody. I don't know what it could be, but I was just waiting to see if there was going to be, and I'm not saying generic, but I can't think of another word, general, place saver for a campus leader to say, hey, we need you, or we need this position, we need you, and I'm the only one that has it right now. How would you address that?
Wouldn't that fall under general, under additional pay anyways?
Well-
Because it would most likely, I mean,
Well, if it was a special project and it was worth more than $1,000, then no, it wouldn't.
if it was grant funded, you'd have to hire for the
Yeah,
position.
President Fisher, I think, Ms. Ordway, I think maybe two different things, and there may be a little bit of overlap here. I think Mr. Finch, or Dr. Finch
Ooh.
was,
Getting late.
yeah. So, my apologies.
Mr. Miggs?
I think Dr. Finch was referring to, hey, what if an emergency or an unexpected event happened, and there have been occasions where we've been in between board meetings, and it might take an inordinate amount of time for us to even get the pre-approval. We have not contemplated an exclusion, if you will, or an exemption to the rule on addenda. One of the things that could be used, and we want to be cautious about suggesting this as an option, but they could be paid under extra duty pay up to the $1,000, and then that could be converted to an addenda. So there is a mechanism that we could do something. And again, we are suggesting to the schools that when in doubt, get it pre-approved, right? So if we're going to write a grant, and maybe it's a grant that we don't even know that we're going to get awarded or not, go ahead and request the pre-approval. Start the job descriptions right then and there. In many cases, it's sometimes required as a submission of the grant that you have that level of detail anyhow, so you might as well go through the work, and we can have those pre-approved. If the grant doesn't get awarded and we've got them pre-approved by the governing board, really no harm in that. Again, we're not paying anybody. We wouldn't have anybody's name attached to it to pay them anyhow. So there are a couple avenues because we've had those discussions, but there isn't an exemption that's been included in what we've shared with the schools and departments up to this point in time.
And I don't think that they're, I back up. I do think that with like travel, where we talked about potentially having the superintendent to have those, emergency powers that would not be used on any kind of regular basis. I think that should be part of this process, because something will happen that the 5 of us or 10 of us or 20 of us have not thought about, and what I don't want are our students or staff to suffer as a result of that. I think that, Jim is putting in all the fail-safe, and, I just think that it doesn't hurt us to have those powers with the superintendent where he can grant something for 30 days if there's a...
I think we already have that in policy and in
I was going to
place.
say,
That's
we
what I'm
have
saying.
a
I think we already
policy.
have that, and to the extent that he simply would send out, and it's happened a couple times where, hey, this is what the situation we're in. I'm just going to approve it unless one of y'all tells me no, and move from there. I think that's already kind of in place. Because
I was crossing my fingers when I sent that.
Yeah, because
Well, it's a policy that we
because it's
need
not
to
it's
follow.
not official. This isn't
I'd rather
What-
not
what
do
is
it.
that
policy. This
policy?
is a process. It's
designate him as the
I think
chief
it's actually in the
executive of our,
superintendent's
organization.
policy. When we talk about,
Okay.
We'd have to look specifically at the superintendent
Okay, well,
policy, the
can I
adjustments.
ask you
but-
then if in that case, we had come back and set and voted no,
And I would have to pay for it, probably out of my own pocket, probably, I guess. I don't know.
right?
I have seen that happen, but it's
I guess that's
only
why
with student funds. I've
I'm
never seen that
asking
happen with
for
any
it
other
Yeah,
fund.
right.
be
I want to reinforce what the board is saying. If the board is saying thou shalt, then I don't want to make it thou may. And so in the future, once we decide this is the process, I like to say, no, sorry,
Can
you
we
missed the
just put
deadline.
How about we
Something
get the
middle of the-
policy and
middle
look
of the
at that.
road out there. I mean, if something gets overlooked, we'll put it in the policy. You send an email, and if you don't get a negative, you issue a 30-day. Kind of like what we've been doing, but we could put that in writing.
If it would make it easier to put it in writing, I think that we should potentially pull those policies, but it should not stop us moving forward from, that's my opinion. We should move forward with getting, we don't want to stop the work of the district, in my opinion. And we could look at how to clarify it within either the superintendent's policy or another, or other policy to
Yeah, I
clarify it.
Well, I
Ms.
just
Ordway?
think that if there were to be such an emergency or a unique situation, that the trust that we have in his expertise should be respected, and he should be able to make that decision without worrying about some kind of recourse. And if after it were to happen, and we would say, oh, that wasn't the decision, well, then that's okay. He learns from that, and so do we. But I think that we need to make sure we follow. You know, I mean, he is our.
And it's after 9 o'clock at night, but I'm pretty sure there's something even somewhere in statute that
Yeah.
provides that.
There's a
Yeah, I think
there's a
there is.
policy.
I think it's in there.
It's, I think, in your job description somewhere.
No, I actually think it is. I think it's
Their
written
duties
somewhere
as
in
assigned.
statute. Yeah.
So
I-
why don't we look that up and maybe circle back to it at the next meeting? I think
Okay.
it's certainly reasonable.
I think January would probably be a more reasonable meeting, because that kind of research takes a little bit more time.
Okay.
And we have holidays.
Well, and this doesn't preclude them from continuing.
No,
on
it doesn't
at
stop
all,
them
you know,
from
they
moving
just keep
forward.
No, but I
going.
think it's certainly reasonable to allow the superintendent to have emergency powers as it,
If it's not already there, I
Yeah.
absolutely agree.
Because I don't actually think this is board policy. This is a process that
Process.
we're sharing with you. If you're saying, the five of you are saying that, you know, there's a maybe clause in it, then we can include it in the maybe. And now then I know that, and I don't feel like I'm stepping on your toes or putting you in a box that, because that's my job, is to protect you as well. And so I'd rather that you put one more line in there that said you
This
can.
is,
But
this is process, not
'Cause it's-
policy.
yeah, it's
It
not
could just be
policy.
written in there.
fine. Thank you.
thanks.
Any additional questions? All right, seeing none, performance pay discussion. Uh-oh, he's caffeinated, I'm scared. Okay, Dr. Smith.
Hey, good evening, President Fisher, members of the governing board. I have the pleasure of starting a discussion on performance pay, specifically the certified performance pay plan. I think the intent of this, or the objective here, is there's kind of twofold. Part of the objective is to make sure that we get a chance to discuss this topic in front of this board, because I don't think we've done it with this current board makeup. Make sure the whole board is kind of on the same page or same level of understanding of certified performance pay. So I think after we spend a couple of hours discussing it, we'll all be in good shape. Just kidding. But the real reason, the bigger reason, is for the committee that develops a plan that is then brought back to the board to be approved, has some guidance and input from the board. So we'll just spend a couple of minutes going through some kind of rudimentary, probably, slides that talk about the plan. It's all generated from the classroom siphon, which we've already talked about a little bit tonight. Again, Proposition 301 passed back in 2000, which resulted in a slight increase in sales tax dedicated to public education. So these are all just real quick bullets. They're supposed to be distributed to school districts on a pure pupil basis, which it actually happens. And there's 40% of these funds, which are commonly known as, I believe, Fund 12. Is that right? Jim? Fund 12 is dedicated for teacher performance pay. And in the law, actually, the board is responsible for then adopting a plan for this 40% of funds. They're actually responsible for all the funds, but we're talking about this specific 40% of the funds right now. And as we already mentioned, this ends in 2020. I believe, actually, the tax ends at the end of 2020. It might still be funded through that school, into that school year 20 and 21. So that's just a real quick synopsis of the Classroom Site Fund, of which there's much more detail and much more information, but just to make sure we're all at least that level of understanding. And since the board is responsible for adopting a plan, at least for as long as I've been here, there has been a committee that has kind of formulated a plan that is brought to this board every year, and in general that committee develops a plan for the following school year. We have had years where data and information and specific components of the plan were in question, and we actually adopted the plan in the same school year as the plan was executed. That wasn't a very favorable situation, if any of you remember that, but we always try to adopt this a year in advance, as we have right now a plan for this year already in place, and we're getting ready to work on next year's plan. This is the current makeup of the Performance Pay Committee. You can see we have 4 teachers, 4 school administrators. We do have an open parent position, and then I facilitate that committee. I do have several of my committee members here in the room today, so I appreciate them coming to also hear what you have to say and the direction that you might give us in the end as we take it back to our next committee meeting. The charge of the committee basically is twofold. It's one, to develop a plan that makes sure, you know, it meets the law and it meets the governing board direction, et cetera, and then to manage that plan, to actually execute the deployment of that plan in terms of communication, and then calculating the pay and making sure that pay actually gets then to the right people in our payroll and benefits office. And then the final piece is to actually hear appeals. So the committee kind of both develops and then executes or manages the plan. So a real quick summary of the committee. Here's a norms for our committee. I just want to throw that up there. So the main one I want you to look at is the third one. Is as we do all of our decision making by consensus, and under the definition of consensus, when we come to a point where we all can say we can at least live with this plan, or yeah, we like this plan, we are agreeing that we will support that decision and we will help implement that decision. So that's kind of understood by the whole committee, and norms we go over in the very first committee meeting every year. The committee is guided basically by 3 things. One, by the history of what we've done with this performance pay plan. 2, by legislation, Arizona law, and 3, by board direction. These aren't necessarily in priority area, but they're in priority order, but they're in the order that I'm going to quickly touch on, so that the last one will be board direction, because that's where I would like for you to participate in the discussion. The plan, as far as plan history, there's been actually lots of variations of the plan depending on what data was available and what achievement information was out there, and what labels were happening in the state. But for the most recent 3 or 4 years, we've had a pretty consistent plan that it primarily looks like this 2017-18 performance pay plan. There's 3 components to this plan, and we split and calculate each component separately and pay that piece out. Then we compile it all together and pay it all in one paycheck, but we calculate it separately for each component. One is responsibility hours or professional development hours, which is 10% of that pay. The teacher evaluation is 50% of that plan, and the district letter grade is 40%. So there you see it add up to 100% of the potential pay that a teacher could get. And the detail is in the appendix of your PowerPoint. And I won't go through it unless we need to look at a specific detail, but those are all calculated, and then for each teacher, and then that teacher is final dollar amount is enrolled into pay at the time we pay in hopefully early to mid to sometimes late June of this current year. We've been able to do that for the last couple of years, as opposed to splitting the check over a couple of payments in the past. So that's that's a quick history, not a whole lot of history, but kind of quick understanding of what's guiding us in terms of history. A big piece that guides us, of course, is state law. So I have a couple of slides here on different statutes that summarize. This first one is basically saying, hey, we need to do a teacher evaluation, and kind of off the top, it doesn't look like, well, this doesn't impact performance pay, but it does, as you'll see in a future statute I'm going to show in just a minute. So it just says we have to have a teacher evaluation instrument, and it has to result in highly effective, developing, or ineffective ratings. And we actually have a separate committee that works on teacher evaluation, and this statute drives a lot of their work. But I mention it here because it's going to come into play in just a second. The second statute I want to look at is actually the classroom site fund, the main classroom site fund statute, and it starts with a bunch of definitions. And here's where you see that we allocate 40% of those classroom site fund monies to this performance pay component. So that's all that's telling you in subsection A. So we're funding performance pay. In subsection B, we're saying, as we've already mentioned, that the governing board must adopt a performance-based compensation system, and that individual teacher performance, as measured by the teacher's performance classification, pursuant to the law we just looked at. So here you see the evaluation coming back into play. So we're supposed to use that under subsection B, the evaluation in the plan. So that's all I was trying to tell you, that here is that evaluation should be part of that plan. As a matter of fact, it tells you specifically for the part of the 40% of the allocation, the Fund 12, that we allocated through the Classroom Site Fund. And finally are a bunch of other items that are available to use in the plan, and I call them other plan items. This is under subsection C. This is a school district governing board shall vote on performance-based compensation system that includes the following elements, and you can see there are 12 elements listed there. There's teacher evaluation listed again, number 2, but there's school and district performance, academic performance, surveys, teacher vote, appeal process, many components there, that when you first read this subsection, you think, okay, this is going to be a pretty elaborate and comprehensive plan. We have, in the past and in the current plan, always leveraged subsection E, which basically says a school district governing board may modify the elements contained in subsection C of this section and consider additional elements. So we have always leveraged that, and we have been audited and approved and okayed on this. At least it hasn't been an audit finding yet, that basically this allows the board discretion to modify those elements and to approve a plan that has something that doesn't necessarily contain all 12 of those elements or all of them precisely to how they're stated, but to the best we want to execute a plan for our district. That was quick, and I gave you another little synopsis. You have with you a little kind of more detail on all of those subsections of the statutes, and with some highlighting on there of what these excerpts that I pulled out of there. If you want to find them quickly, or you have trouble falling asleep later, you can read them. Okay, the final piece of the state law just says, hey, you can't use the money for anything else. You got to keep the money in the plan. If for some reason we did not pay out all of that 40% allocation in a current year, then you have to roll it over, and you have to make sure the interest on it is rolled over so that you pay it out in a future year. So that this final statute is saying, hey, don't spend it on something else than what it was intended for. Which brings me to the final section of guidance for the Performance Pay Committee, and I think the importance of having this discussion tonight, which is governing board input or governing board direction on where you would like us to go with this plan for the next school year. I've kind of had 2 bullets up there, 2 main bullets. One, what our previous boards told us, and what is our current board going to tell us, which I hope we'll find out more tonight. And some of you have been on some of those previous boards. Maybe some of these bullets have come across during those times of your service, but they have, make sure you include student achievement, which is one of the items anyway in subsection C that you just saw. Some board members, or a board member, at least one, has said, hey, differentiate performance pay among teachers. Some have said, no, let's make sure there's at least a minimal level of performance in the plan. And then others have said, let's make sure we pay out 100% of the funds every year. All of those things have been taken into consideration in past plans, and potentially could be taken into consideration in future plans. In terms of your input tonight, I'd like to at least give you some options before you start having that, so you're not on a blank page of paper. So the next couple of slides that you look at have some things to think about. One option is, hey, I don't want I want relatively little, if any, differentiation in performance pay. You know, it's basically, you know what, I think it'd be appropriate to have every eligible teacher receive about the same amount, if not exactly the same amount. Another option at the other maybe end of the spectrum of that is, hey, I want to differentiate performance pay. And you could do that in two ways in those next two bullets. You could differentiate it based on teacher evaluations, and you could say we should have slight, moderate, or very significant differentiation there. And you could differentiate it in terms of school performance or district performance, or academic achievement for the school or district. So those are a couple of things for you to consider that we'd like for you to, opine on to some degree. The fourth bullet there, what you saw in we got from previous board, was should we set minimum levels of expectations where, hey, this level of performance, maybe for this specific component, probably doesn't merit any performance pay, or does any level of performance, do you tier it, but at least everybody should get some of every piece, every component of the performance pay. Or you could jump back up to the first bullet and say, no, they should receive all of it no matter what the component is. A couple of other things. Is it your kind of desire, or would you see us or have an opinion that maybe we pay out 100% of the funds available, or relatively close to 100%, or do you allow the money to roll over if it perchance would enhance the plan and how we execute the plan? And then I just threw up there, thoughts on the current plan components. You see the components listed there again. Are there other components that you think are appropriate or we should have in the plan? And then the hodgepodge kind of et cetera, other considerations. So that's kind of where I was going to leave it. There is a little appendix there on some of the detail. If any of you want to look at that in more detail, we can bring those slides up. But I'm really looking for you to help this committee with kind of your thoughts on what direction should we go, so that we can then, at a future meeting, probably sometime after the first of the year, bring back a plan for you to approve and us to execute next year.
Ms. Tweedy.
I want to make sure, though, that the board and might understand that when Dr. Finch indicated that letter grades were given on a bell curve, that means that the schools don't have control over the letter grades, because you would have to, when we talk about a bell curve, you're comparing people to each other. We only do that for comparison purposes. So regardless of how good everyone's results are, someone has to fail, someone has to be the best, most people have to be in the middle. I would just like to ask, if we are going to set an improvement, have it be improvement based, that it's actually improvement people have control over, because nobody wants to work at a job. It's not motivating to set a goal you have no ability to control whether you meet. If letter grades were criterion based, that would make more sense. I mean, you could say we're going to improve on the number of students in our district who are in the lowest category. We're going to improve our graduation rate. That's something we have control over. We have no control over our letter grade if it's norm-based. That's misusing assessment to do something like that. It's completely unfair. I would recommend, too, that we do a minimum proficiency for performance pay. I do know, I've been evaluated. I know that there's inter-rater reliability issues with any teacher evaluation system. I've worked, well, I'm not going to get into that, but I will just say it just depends on the evaluator. I mean, now there's certain things that are just universally incompetent, and if someone's doing those things, perhaps they aren't performing. But I'm not into varying, and I do think we should pay out 100% every year. I don't think we should roll it over. I think if the employees earn their money, they should get their money, and it should be distributed amongst the people who earned it. So those are my thoughts.
I want to point out the last couple of years we have gone off the district grade as a whole versus individual school grades, because honestly you can't control it, and This year, we don't have a district-wide grade. We are also, I believe, appealing some of the grades. My preference would be that we stick with the current, it's district-wide grade, just as, and we stick with the grade that we actually have as a district as a whole, which goes unchanged. That would be my choice if we're putting that input out. The other thing that when we're looking at,
Kim, how are you, how
we use the grade that we currently do have, which is, since the grade has not been changed, it remains the A
just
grade change. Yeah, it's just because unless they give us a different grade, it's where we're at. It's never changed. The only other alternative would be to take all of our grades, put them in the 1, 2, 3, 4, and then give us an average. Either way, it's going to be district-wide, and that component would be just straight across. The other thing that I believe we've discussed it every year, is when we talk about achievement, student achievement, I think there has to be a growth factor, because if you are teaching a special ed class and those kids are failing miserably at such and such test, but they have leaps and bounds in growth from where they were to where they are, versus the teacher who has all the kids who just blink and go, okay, yeah, I know the answers, and write them down. It's kind of a little bit skewed. Let's just say, I mean, growth should be a factor versus achievement. The growth that my son has experienced in one class versus another is significantly, and I think that's much more important than, I mean, I'm not saying we don't want to consider that our students are achieving. Yes, they should achieve, but we also don't want to penalize a SPED teacher who is one of our hardest positions to fill, because their class cannot pass the state assessment. So that's just my thought.
I would just like to add, I will not support a performance pay plan that awards some teachers more money based on the letter grade of the school, and which does not take into account socioeconomic factors. According to the American Psychological Association, students from low socioeconomic backgrounds enter high school about 5 grades behind in reading than their more advantaged peers. So you be the language arts teacher who has to make that up, and tell me that teacher deserves less money because the students didn't perform as well on a standardized test when they came in way behind. I also did a little bit of research. I found an article on ERIC. I'm not going to read the entire article because it's 9:30. I do just want to read a couple of takeaways from the conclusions. The inclusion of a school value-added component in teachers' evaluation scores negatively impacts good teachers in bad schools and positively impacts bad teachers in good schools. This measure should be eliminated, reduced, or revised for more positive use in teacher evaluation systems. If evaluation systems go beyond the carrot and stick diagnostics of good and bad teachers and instead are used as systems to support professional development, teachers will be much more willing to support the evaluation reforms. So I know that's the teaser. You're dying to find out more. I made copies for my fellow board members, Dr. Finch and Dr. Smith.
I ditto Ms. Frank's sentiments on this. I won't support anything with those components either.
And that's not just my personal opinion, that's actually based on research.
Is it my turn?
Unless I think of something else or find more
Absolutely,
parts
chime
to read.
in, Ms. Ordway.
All right, thank you. I think we have to include some type of evaluation, correct, Dr. Smith?
Apparently, President Fisher, Ms. Ordway, I'm not a lawyer, but as
Just be
I read
yourself.
the statute, 15977 subsection B says you're supposed to include the teacher evaluation.
Because I know when I was on the
subsection C also includes evaluation, and subsection E can override subsection C, but not B.
because I think that was a topic for the few years I was on that committee, is that we all talked about how the evaluation is really not so helpful, but yet it's required as part of statute for
But
that.
that's the minimally proficient. You could say if you're an underperforming, you're not eligible. If you're basically
But
receiving ones or
I was just trying to tell Ms. Frank, we believe you. I mean, we agree with you, but some type of evaluation has to be included in the
Oh,
plan.
absolutely. I'm speaking about the letter grades for the schools.
Well,
The school.
we've never used individual school letter grades, and we can use our district letter grade.
Right, it was on one of the
Oh,
slides.
okay.
So
So-
as a proposed something to think about, so since they asked for board direction, I was providing my direction along with research.
Well, I think we
So-
don't like the individual school letter grade altogether.
Right, you have to
Yeah.
have a teacher evaluation, and that's
Absolutely.
then
Mhm.
based on observations and student achievement scores and a variety of things, not
Right.
just one standardized test that, your school letter grade is based on one test on one day.
And I think we did address that a couple years ago, so if we stayed with
Yeah.
the same district-wide, it wouldn't.
So, President Fisher,
Would
may I
address
clarify a
that.
couple things?
Scott, Dr. Smith, could I finish?
You certainly may.
Because this may just make it easier for you. I'm kidding. Growth instead of or in place of achievement has been important also, and the 100% payout. And other than that, good to go. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so I guess the first thing I would like to clarify from Ms. Frank is, so you were talking about value-added growth, not the evaluation?
Correct. I was not
article?
talking about the evaluation. That has to be
Okay.
in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a couple of things to clarify. The growth model used by the state of Arizona, which is kind of formulated after the Colorado growth model, is not a value-added growth model. It's a relative growth model, a percentile growth model, relative to your peers across the state. Not necessarily without issues also, but not fraught with as many issues, at least as far as the literature is concerned right now. But it may or may not be an appropriate thing to use, and something for you to continue to, I would hope, opine on, and the committee to consider and to talk about. The only other thing I'd like to clarify is, yes, letter grades were determined, the cuts for letter grades were determined based on a normal distribution across the state. But if you remember, the distribution for us as a district was not nearly close to normal. It was, and I think I'm going to use Dr. Finch's terminology, it was more like a ski slope. So it was skewed. So it wasn't, we didn't norm every district to that distribution. It was, how do we compare? So you can have a skewed distribution within a specific school district or region or subset of that data. Just want to clarify that for everybody.
the schools that fell on the other side of the bell curve are going to analyze that, and they may demonstrate, and they have more room to improve. We just have no idea. I mean, that's not mathematically possible to have any idea at this point. We've only had 1 year, and we couldn't even predict what's going to happen. So I think our employees deserve better than something that we can't even mathematically predict and have no control over. I mean, we have control over criteria. We don't have control over a bell curve. Because we would have to control other people's performances. We could go sabotage our neighboring districts.
I like it. One thing you may not want to think about too is, because he asked it, he asked what level of effort or value do you want to give to the evaluation, because you have to have it anyway. Moderate, none, minimal, a lot. to give some differentiation between staff. And I think Ms. Tweedy mentioned, well, there's, one campus might evaluate harder, tougher than another campus, so that's why you wouldn't want to put a lot of value on it. But that's an option for you to do as well. And I think they're looking for that direction from you as well.
Dr. Smith, the appendix you have with the 2017-2018 plan detail, this is the plan we've already approved for this school year?
That's correct.
Okay, so you're talking about modifying this plan or talking about 2018-19?
President Fisher, Ms. Ordway, yeah, we're talking about the 18-19 plan that's going to be developed by the committee and brought later in the year for approval. So this plan that's in the appendix is in place, been approved by this board, I believe.
I thought so. It is getting late, and I wanted to make sure my memory was serving me correctly still. I support the other board members and their recommendation that we spend all 100%. I don't know that we should continue to use a district letter grade as part of it when they're not being issued by the state anymore. I mean, that grade, the last time we received it was 2014. Okay. So it would be my preference that we figure out some other component to fill in there. I don't know that I have.
President Fisher, Ms. O'Brien, if I may, if you wanted to make that more generic to think about, and we've already mentioned it, many of you, is think about it. Instead of letter grade, think about it, what about, is there anything in your mind that, in terms of student performance, student achievement, student outcomes, is what that is trying to capture or has tried to capture in the past. And so instead of, having letter grade under this third bullet here, or school performance or whatever, is there any other indicator that captures that sense that you think would be potentially more attractive?
Are you talking about possibly breaking apart the grade and picking a category within, because the grade comes in, what is there, like, there's a ton of categories that make up that grade, several components. Is that what you're talking about?
Ms. Fisher, that would be a good, probably one of the first options I would throw out. And as you mentioned, that letter grade is made up of a proficiency component or achievement component, which we've already heard a little bit about, and it has a growth component, which we've already heard a little bit about, and it has, of course, for high schools, the graduation and college and career readiness indicators and the acceleration and readiness indicators.
I think the only way that I would support that type of thing is if it was a component that takes out the factors that skew it against Title I or low-income schools. Because there are specific things when you break apart that whole evaluation system that skew it in favor of a higher socioeconomic area versus the other.
And that's what I was thinking too, because, and it might make sense to have a high school goal and have an elementary goal, because as you indicated, their letter grades are based on different things. So I don't remember if like the CTE was valued more than the dropout rate, but maybe the district would have a combined will reduce or will increase our graduation rate. And you take the average of all schools, and that would be a high school goal. I'm just brainstorming. I mean, the committee should discuss this. And then I think you said in the elementary was weighted more towards growth. So if we averaged all the K-8s, did our growth improve? This way, if somebody has a disastrous year, the whole staff's not penalized. I mean, if most of the district's moving right, we have enough students, and you're not dealing with such a small population. I mean, I remember when Ames was the deal and analyze your subgroup, and we had 2 people in that subgroup. So if one person performed poorly, 50% change in 1 year. So at least that kind of offsets that. You have a big group.
Is there a possibility that we just provide direction to the committee that they look at the factors and come up with a reasonable recommendation?
Well, I think really in the past, it's been the committee that's brought what they've achieved through consensus to us. And I appreciate that you're looking for board direction in advance. But I would agree with Ms. Fisher that perhaps at this point, you take this back to the committee and let them hash it out, come up with a plan to bring back to us.
Bring that factor forward at least.
That's fine.
I don't know if we've given you enough information or a sense of where the board in general is going.
President Fisher, Ms. Frank. No, I think you're fine to a large degree. We probably do have a committee that represents kind of different ends of the spectrum on things to use, so your input is very valuable to us as we kind of start to come to something together. I do need to clarify one other thing for you, please, if you would grant me that option. If you notice on this other components page of our current plan, this is where we say we ensure that we're going to pay all the funds out, or virtually all the funds out, where we roll unpaid funds from the evaluation component into the letter grade component, and then make sure through a mathematical process that all the rest of the money is paid out through that component. The implication being, if we do anything achievement-wise, let's say it's not letter grade, it's something other achievement, it's growth, or it's whatever, or split by high school and elementary, but we're going to do it at a district level, and we say we're going to pay all the money out, it doesn't matter what you do. And here's why. Because everybody in the district is going to have the exact same result, and even if, let's say it was a district letter grade and we got a D, and so you only get 10% of your performance pay for that section, well, then I say, well, let's pay it all out, though. So allocate the 10% again, allocate again, till it's all paid out. So no matter what the result would be, at a district level, everybody would get all that money. The point being, if you don't differentiate at a school level or, at any level, and just do it at a district level, and you say, let's pay all the money out, then they're always going to get it all, which is fine if that's where your head is. But you're saying that really it's kind of a not very meaningful kind of tool.
Not the people that are ineligible for it, though, because of their performance or
22,
something. They wouldn't get any of it.
Right. Those 10 people or
Would take
13
care
people.
of the people that didn't earn it.
So just a quick, if I may.
Yes.
The intent of Prop 301 was to increase salaries for teachers, was to find a creative way to compensate teachers that everyone recognized were undercompensated. And I was not a teacher in 2000, but I do remember voting yes on Prop 301 because I thought this would be a great way to get more money to teachers. I did not vote yes on Prop 301 thinking, let's build some great hoops for teachers to jump through. I think we would be wise to consider what the intent of the voters was when this was passed. And obviously if someone is underperforming or if they're ineffective, no, you don't want to give that person performance pay. But I don't believe that we're going to increase morale or help retain teachers by creating an elaborate obstacle course for them to maneuver through to get what really is not a lot of money anyway. That's my opinion, and I do not have a research article to back it up, but that's my opinion. I'll find one.
Well, I do get the point that it's we do want the money to go out, but there has to be some component where if you have 10 teachers and you have 2 of them that are not performing horribly, but they're also not, a high flyer is what I believe the terminology was the last time it was mentioned to me. You're going to damage morale if you give the one that's not much of a high flyer the same performance pay as someone who is. So there's got to be some sort of differentiation, in my opinion. Ms. O'Brien.
Thank you. Based on the 2017-2018 plan, which I think has been in place for a couple of years now, I will tell you that I, as a board member, continue to like the component that is the evaluation, the teacher evaluation part, because there is a differentiation for pay based on their evaluation score there. The component that is the district letter, and that is 50% of their evaluation. So that, to me, unless I misunderstand, does provide a teacher the opportunity to directly impact 50% of their evaluation pay that they get. I do understand that there can be issues with rater evaluation, reliability. It really is
Inter-rater reliability.
Yeah, it's really too late for me to say all those syllables all together. So thank you, Ms. Franks. But it is necessary to have the differentiation there. So I will tell you, I personally like that component. I'm also going to disclose that I believe I was on the committee when we helped to develop that. So I have a little bit of...
Might have a bias there.
Might have a tiny bias there. The district letter grade is... I'm going to back up because 10% is responsibility and PD hours, which also provides another direct ability for them to control to get. So they have control over 60% of it. And the other 40%, which was attributed to the district letter grade, which I would love for the committee to look at ways to look at the student achievement at a district-wide level, and maybe it has to be broken into high school. I don't want to tell you how to do that part of it, but I think that there does need to be, we need to be able to say to our constituency that here, this is based on some kind of student achievement. I don't know if it's the growth scores. I don't know if it's the proficiency. I don't know if it's a combination thereof. If you want to throw in graduation rates and, the different things, I know Deer Valley is really good in a lot of those areas. So I would love for that. I think 60% of it looks fabulous. I think the other 40%, we would be foolish to continue using a 2014 letter grade. I apologize. I just think that we will get flack from the community.
And
I'd love to go.
Yeah,
I'd
I
love
don't
to be
have
able
a
to
problem. I don't have a problem with that either. My concern is I do not want to inappropriately punish our Title I schools while we reward someone for just having their school built in, because what happens is we end up with a shift of employees where I don't want to work
I
there.
concur wholeheartedly.
Right.
So I guess that is my looking at the plan we have in place and trying to take steps forward, given what AD is doing now. That is just this board member's humble opinion. Thank you.
And I would support that. Like I said, if we could pick that one factor that is not skewed by a socioeconomic, where O'Connor versus Goldwater have the same ability to meet that.
Well, socioeconomic or also a higher population of special ed children, or campuses that have lots of teachers that are on, say, long-term medical leave. I mean, there's a lot of all of that stuff. So you guys have a big job ahead of you.
To find that one component.
I would
Or two.
I would suggest too that you would entertain these, if you want to throw components in, that it somehow points to our new strategic plan, i.e. if you want to improve graduation rates and maybe do a 3-year adopt this thing, 2 or 3 years in advance or as you go, that will also push the needle in whatever direction you want it to go. and our strategic plan is being formed as we speak. That might give you a place to go look for
Right.
it.
I think that's also good. And I think it could be, it doesn't just have to be one thing. It could be that one section could be made up of, I don't know if that makes it too complicated, but do you understand what I'm trying to say is
Something that's
that that
consistent.
component could be multiple things.
Right.
Right. And I would,
I agree with that.
I personally
And you
rather
want
it
everyone
not
to be happy, so don't forget that as you're doing your work.
Just smile.
President Fisher, Ms. Ordway, okay, that'll be an easy task. Make everybody happy. So I don't know what to call it. I'll call it level set again, with you. And this is my opinion, but I think it's based on data and fact. The piece that is the least impactful based on socioeconomics is the growth piece. Well, I think we would all agree that the proficiency piece is going to be heavily skewed by socioeconomics and by proportion of special ed kids and by teacher displacement or on leave sort of things. The growth piece is probably going to also be skewed a little bit by some of those, but controls for a lot more than any other component of that data. So I just want to throw that at you because I know because the growth piece might be the thing that comes out then.
You have title schools represented on the committee though as well, right?
Yes.
And you have higher SES schools, so, and you have high schools and you have grade schools. So I think if the committee could come up with something that was student achievement based, but they were in agreement and they're going to understand what would be skewed against their own school, I'm sure.
What do we still take the district assessments quarterly, or are there still district quarterly assessments?
President Fisher, Ms. O'Brien, yes, there are some required common district assessments. Of course, it differs depending on your grade band. I mean, it gets more complicated then because it's going to differ depending on your grade band at your school and what K-6 schools have to give versus K-8 versus middle school versus high school. But it's certainly an option.
I don't know if things have changed since I was a teacher, but I do recall that many of those tests didn't follow the scope and sequence of the curriculum. So I don't think those would be a good choice. Maybe that, but those.
Yeah, I would say that one.
Well, we're sending it back to the committee.
Okay. Anything else
Thank you.
on this topic?
I think the committee should stay till 10 discussing it too.
Yeah. Okay, seeing no other questions or comments on that one. We have our upcoming sessions noted. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those
Aye.
in favor?
Aye.
It was a roll call to everyone, aye.
Roll call, everyone.